meeting today. In the room with me, I have Andy Allen and Dawn Starleaf. We have Alex Eason, Sinead Innes, Kelly Armstrong, Mark Durkin and Karen Mullen. So you are all very welcome. I'm going to move then on to agenda item number 1, which is apologies. Have we any apologies? Sinead, have you one? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to item number 2, which is chairperson's business. Members, we've been advised that the DARE Committee is undertaking scrutiny of the decision of Mid and East Antrim Borough Council and DARE to withdraw staff from Larnport and DARE from Belfast Port. The committee will shortly finalise its terms of reference for the work it intends to undertake and will provide this to us in due course. Members, any comments or content to note? Intend to note that? Yeah, okay. Members, I just have one more thing under chairperson's business, and it was a response that the Minister gave to one of the questions in question time on Tuesday whenever it was brought up about DFC, the Sports Sustainability Fund and sporting clubs. She appeared well, she actually said that she has not been lobbied on this issue to any great extent. When I know this committee has talked about this every week since before Christmas recess. We have sent letters to her department. Her DALO listens in every week to our committee. So I find it a wee bit hard to believe that the Minister has not been made aware of these issues that are happening with our sports clubs. And I mean, it is every week I'm saying it. I was contacted again with another sports club this week who had been turned down for their LRS scheme and was far too late then to apply for the Sports Sustainability Fund, albeit they're not a sporting club, they're a social club. So it's just that, I just want to put that on the record, that this committee has actively been working on this issue on behalf of those many sports clubs that have contacted us, and I just find it a little bit hard to believe the Minister didn't know an awful lot about it or wasn't informed about it. So that was all I wanted to say on that issue. Members, I'm going to move on then to agenda item 3, which is draft minutes. You'll find these at page 6 on our draft minutes for the 11th of February 2021. Are members content with the minutes as drafted? Content? Good stuff, thank you. Members, are going to move on to matters arising. Before I start matters arising, bear with us, there's an awfully long amount of matters arising to get through. There's pages upon pages, and we have 4 briefings today. So just very conscious of time, and if any members do have comments, can they just make their comments succinct? So the first item on matters arising, if members would turn to page 14, there's a reply from Unison in relation to supporting people. Unison states that it has only been in contact with the Minister for Communities on this issue of concern and are awaiting response from their meeting that they had with her back in December. That was based on a letter we had sent to Unison. So that was just their response. Are members content to note that?
Content.
Thank you. I'll move on then. Members, page 15, you've been provided with a NICFA reply in relation to the Concordat Agreement. Following recent meetings, the Department officials and the Minister and NICFA has, in response to a request from the Minister, recently developed a draft manifesto for change document identifying key priorities and actions for strengthening the joint working relationships between government and the voluntary and community sector. NICFA is currently consulting the sector on this document. NICFA see more value in pursuing the issues identified in the manifesto than reviewing the wording of the underpinning Concordat Agreement, as the Government Voluntary Sector Joint Forum had identified that the need was not to review the Concordat but to improve practical joint working. Members, again, any comments on that or content to note? Go ahead, Kelly.
Chair, I was just going to say it would be worthwhile if we maybe wrote back to NICFA and thank them for that, but ask them if, as early as possible, we could have a written briefing. If we're outside lockdown, then a face-to-face meeting, perhaps with them, a presentation on what that better working relationships would be. I'm extremely keen to find out how across the department and all departments how future procurement of the community and voluntary sector will work, given that many of them haven't got letters of offer this close to a financial year. Is there something within that manifesto that's looking for commitments from government to give them a further advance notice, and whether it's a contract or a grant and so on?
Okay, we can do that. Any other members, any other comments? Are you content then that I move on? Content? Yeah. Okay, members, then if I could ask you to turn to page 17 of your pack, we have a departmental response in relation to welfare reform mitigation measures. It states that the department is committed to full and proper engagement with the committee on the welfare reform mitigation measures, and the work is being taken forward as three distinct but related elements. The first element of this process is legislation to extend the existing statutory welfare mitigation measures, a draft bill to provide for the extension of the social sector size criteria. Mitigation scheme has been prepared and shared with the Executive. The Executive has previously agreed to the bill being introduced under the accelerated passage procedure, and the Minister appeared before this committee on the 13th of February 2020, that's last year, to explain the reasons for that. I know that we, at that time, whenever we had got that through, the committee was just newly formed. We were just then on the mouth of the COVID, so therefore we had been absolutely seen that had to happen. We're a year down the line, and we still have seen nothing about these welfare mitigation measures or anything to do with them. So I wouldn't be overly happy with accelerated passage. But we're getting so close to the end of March that I don't know what we're going to do there. Kelly, I'll bring you in a wee minute. Just when I finish this, I'll bring you in. It also then, the first element also includes the Welfare Supplementary Payment Extension Regulations. This statutory rule is subject to the draft affirmative procedure and will provide for the extension of the remaining welfare mitigation scheme. The second element of the process will be two statutory rules subject to the draft affirmative procedure that will seek to amend the existing mitigation schemes and to provide for payments for eligible people who are claiming universal credit. This will include changes to the eligibility criteria for the social sector size criteria and benefit cap mitigation schemes by closing the loopholes in those schemes. And the third element of work is the review that was included as a commitment in the NDNA deal. The current position is that the Department is currently finalising proposals for the format of the review. An announcement on the way forward will be made at the earliest opportunity. I know, Kelly, you'd wanted to come in, and then Sinead.
Thank you very much, Chair. To be honest, there's very little at this stage now that's been left for us. I'm extremely disappointed that a year later the information's only coming forward to us now, and I know that the Minister had talked about it in the Chamber the other day. It's very disappointing that the committee has not been included, and it looks like the Department's going to go ahead with accelerated passage. My concern really is the final element that's mentioned within the letter. There's 6 weeks left until the new financial year. Last year, now a year ago, new decade, new approach, there was an agreement there for a review to take place. To say that the Department is only now planning to invite customer representative groups to participate is disingenuous, to say the least. It means then that the financial year is going to start with no opportunities to review what was and what could be added. We know that there are, later on today, we will hear a call for improvements relating specifically to COVID, but I'm sure a lot of these groups, in particular the Cliff Edge Coalition and especially Marie Curie when it comes to the terminal illness, have many other options and items that they would have liked to have had discussed. I'm just wondering if we could write back with disappointment to the Department just to state that the final element is extremely late in coming, that the committee actually should be included within the discussions, and that we see their plans for that as soon as possible. And when do they envisage that the review will take place and any additional elements will be able to actually be implemented?
Okay, thank you, Kelly. I have Sinead and then I have Mark. So Sinead.
Thanks, Chair. Listen, look, the priority for all of us now needs to be to get the extension of the existing mitigations and make sure that we close the loopholes. And then the conversation will need to move to how we can actually enhance the mitigations after that and moving forward. So while obviously this sits within the remit of Department for Communities, it is an executive issue as a whole. And I think further to Kelly's proposal, I think that this committee needs to write to the executive and demand that the mitigations are finalised and the package that was agreed last February is put in place.
Okay, thank you, Sinead. Mark? Mark Durkin, can we bring Mark in, please?
I don't think Mark's there, Kelly, or Paula, sorry.
Sorry, it's dropped out. That's okay. Okay, so I have a proposal there from Kelly. And, sorry, Mark,
Sorry.
go ahead, Mark. We lost
So I
you.
don't know what exactly happened there. It was really Kelly hit most of the points that I had, in terms of disappointment. We've been raising this for more than a year now, so to hear it being discussed as or talked about as a priority now, it's a bit hard to get your head around. And then I welcome that the commitment, let's say, the department is committed to full and proper engagement with the committee on welfare mitigation measures. Jeepers, I'd hate to see what we'd have got or not got if they weren't committed to it, because like I say, we've been raising this for 13 or nearly 14 months now, and not getting many answers or any insight into the ministers, the two different ministers we've had, their plans. And I'm not blaming the ministers for this. I know there are issues at executive as well, but it's been most frustrating for ourselves as committee members. I mean, the reason we want to scrutinise this, the reason we want to have input into it, it's not just about us as MLAs, it's about those experts in the sector, and it's to make sure that we get it right. And this is an opportunity to do so, and I think if we miss this opportunity to right the wrongs, then we might not get another one. We've seen how long we've had to wait for this one. But just to second Kelly's proposal formally.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Nobody else wanting to come in on this issue. So we have a proposal from Mark and proposal from Kelly and Sinead. So members in agreement with what they've both proposed, yes?
Agreed. Yeah.
Agreed. Good stuff. Okay. I'm going to ask you to move on then, members, to page 19, where you'll see a departmental response in relation to tenders. The response provides an update on the present situation in relation to tender submissions to provide work-ready employability services. The bid for funding was not met within the draft budget settlement, so the awarding of the contract has been paused. Under procurement guidance, tenders will now be asked if they wish their tenders to continue to be considered. The department is currently considering whether funding can be found to proceed with this contract. Members, again, can I ask any comments, or are you content to note that response? Kelly, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to say, again, like Sinead had said earlier, this is an issue within the executive. Should we, as committee, write to the executive? Now, obviously, these tenders have been paused and businesses have been asked to, if they're still interested, but still interested on what. We don't have any work-ready employability services to offer any young people or older people coming through, as that matter. I think it would be worthwhile to support the Minister by writing to the executive to say that we're extremely disappointed that the department has not received an allocation of funding for work-ready employability services that will help to take those young people out of unemployment before it becomes a more difficult problem for Northern Ireland to resolve.
Okay, yep, thank you, Kelly. Members agreed with Kelly's proposal? Yes? Can I hear you? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, where are we now? Yeah, can I ask you then to move to page 21 of your meeting pack, where we've been provided with a response from the department in relation to the draft programme for government. It states that once the executive has agreed the final framework, departments will commence work on development of initial PFG delivery action plans. The department will be in a position to brief the committee on proposed PFG actions once it reaches this stage of the process. Again, can I ask members, are they content to note this, or any comments? Kelly?
Just to say that during New Decade, New Approach, there was a housing outcome agreed. I don't see any further mention of that, and we haven't heard from the department what that housing outcome could be developed to look like. I'd be quite keen to ask the department when they're coming to brief us to explain what's happening with that housing outcome, why it hasn't been included, and what actions will be taken forward to deliver upon that political agreement.
Okay, thank you. We can do that as well. Any other comments, members, or content that I move on? Sinead, your hand is up, but I don't think you want to ask a question, do you? No?
No, sorry, Chair, it's from previous.
No, you're all right. You're okay. Okay, members, then can I ask you to move to page 22, where you'll see a departmental response in relation to the PIP assessment contract. The contract with Capita is due to expire, as we know, on the 31st of July 2021, but due to the COVID situation, the department is currently exploring an extension to the contract for up to 24 months. I know this has been brought up in committee in the past, so I'm just going to ask at this stage, any comments? Are you content to note that response? Happy enough? Go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry, I just think we should be asking the department to ensure that Marie Kavanagh's report on PIP, if there's any notes out of that, that's taken into consideration when they are exploring the extension.
Okay, will do. Sorry, Robin, go ahead.
It's just a question, Chair, whether or not Northern Ireland is in the same position as England, Scotland and Wales, and that the other legislators are extending for 24 months as well.
We can ask that question also. It's a good question. Okay, yep, we'll do that. Members agreed, yes?
Agreed.
Agreed, okay, we'll move on. And can I ask you then to turn to page 23, where you'll see a departmental response in relation to the Job Start programme. The reply provides a timeline of all decisions taken thus far in relation to the Job Start scheme. Again, this has been another issue that we have talked about weekly almost as well. So can I just ask then, are members content with this response? Or any comments they wish to make on it? Content with the response? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll move then on, ask you to turn to page 26, where you'll see a
Just
department.
sorry, Chair.
Go ahead, Mark.
So, Chair, just on that timeline, I'm doing my best to look at it on the screen here. This is all what happens in public, or what we already knew about, but we don't know exactly when it got torpedoed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that was one of the questions we had asked a couple of weeks ago when the officials were in, about exactly when did they know that they weren't going to have the money. Was that sort of the... Yeah.
That still doesn't tell us that, does it?
No, it doesn't. Doesn't particularly tell us that. We can't
It tells
go
us
back and ask.
everything but that.
Yeah. We can't go back and ask that question, Mark.
Yeah, because that's the most important piece.
Yeah, it is. You're quite right. Okay, we'll go back and ask that question, follow up from that letter then. Okay, Mark?
Okay, thanks.
Okay then, members, let me see, I've lost my where I am. We're going to page 26 now, I think we are.
Yes.
You'll see a departmental response in relation to the COVID-19 Culture, Language, Arts and Heritage Programme. The department has apologised to the committee for delay in this response due to an administrative oversight. It provides information on the new criteria for applications and the differences in eligibility between the schemes. And I just say I welcome this scheme coming forward as well. Members, any comments, or are they content to note this?
Yes, Chair.
Yep, thank you.
Chair.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Sinead.
Yeah, it's just it's just on the individual's emergency resilience programme that opened on the 17th of December. It closed on the 7th of January, but there's no, because I've been contacted recently just by individuals who are keen to know when those grants are going to be paid out. Is there any way we could get an idea from the department just on when people should be expecting payment of, from that programme?
Yeah, and that was the arts one, wasn't it? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The individual emergency, the resilience programme,
Yeah.
the one
Yep.
that opened on the 17th
Yep,
December.
we will certainly do that. We'll write off today then and ask that question also, Sinead.
Thank you.
Thank you, no problem. Members content that I move on? Yeah? Okay, then can I ask you to turn to page 31 of your packs, where you'll see a departmental response in relation to community transport. The Minister has instructed officials to work with DFI officials to discuss the issues facing the community transport sector and those that they support. Again, can I ask members any comments or content to note? Content to note, yes?
Yep.
Good stuff, okay, thank you. Then can I ask members to turn to page 32, where you'll see a departmental reply in relation to the discretionary support fund. The response outlines the two distinct avenues available to a universal credit applicant are to seek an advance while waiting for their first UC payment, and separately, if an immediate need and facing a crisis situation, to apply also for the UC contingency fund grant. I know this matter came up in the chamber as well on Tuesday during question time around certainly the discretionary support and the difficulties. I know I'd certainly asked the question around it, the difficulties people had in getting this support. So I just wanted to ask members, are there any comments on this or content to note?
Chair,
Go Go ahead, Andy.
Just two aspects. I'd hope to get in the supplementary in the chamber in relation to the wider review of discretionary support. If the committee colleagues are in agreement, can we ask the Minister if there's any consideration around the earnings limit, a further review of that in terms of discretionary support, or the complete abolition of that lower earnings limit? I know that was a subject of the conversation at our stakeholder event as well. So that first of all, and also looking at the figures in relation to UC claims and the number of advances compared with contingency fund payments, it looks, the contingency fund payments to me look incredibly low, which would highlight, more needs to be done to advertise. I don't know what colleagues are like, but I'm still getting people telling me that they're not aware of the contingency fund. They opted for the advance payment because it wasn't clear to them that they could avail of the contingency fund.
No.
So I think more needs to be done on that front.
I think you're absolutely right. There have been issues. I hear the same in my own office. There's issues around this, and it should be the default position, but it really is not the default position. And I know, going back to one of our first meetings here when we had the Minister in front of us, that was very much what she believed, that she wanted to see, that people were not put into debt the moment they start on their universal credit journey. But yet we know that is happening time and time again. So we know changes need to be made. Kelly, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and I concur with Andy. The UCCF funds, that they've called it here, are extraordinarily low compared to the advances. We can see there on page 2 of the document we have received, nearly 16,000 had received the advance loan, whereas it's only 2,500 received the contingency fund. That's stark, because I don't know about you or any normal person out there, Chair, but if I was offered a grant instead of a loan that you didn't have to repay, I think I'd be going for the grant. So I'd be expecting the figures actually to be reversed on that one. To be honest, in the paragraphs above, it's all excuses. The DWP computer system says no, basically. I think that there should be something. I think we need to clarify. And I think that the Minister actually would agree with us that, as a matter of course, that the Northern Ireland system needs to offer the contingency fund before the loans. I just did a quick total up, the comparison of discretionary support awards at the end. Over the 4 years, now I appreciate that the 2021 is only up to December, but there was £20.16 million over 4 years not provided through the discretionary support allocation to people in need out there. That's horrendous. And I just think that it's not viable. And in this year, or the last financial year, I know we only have figures up as far as December, while there was £21.49 million of a budget, only 13.5 was spent by the end of December. Now I expect that figure to go up, but that's still an underspend of just shy of £8 million. This isn't money that we should be shy in providing for people who are in need, especially during a pandemic. I would be keen to support the Minister to consider how, I know that there's talk about a review, but we can review till we're blue in the face. The change needs to happen now within processes. I'd be keen to ask the Minister what actions are being taken by the Department to flip this on its head, to ensure that the contingency funding is offered before the loan. It shouldn't be a matter of process that we put people in debt first. I'm just not buying the excuses that, the two schemes are administered separately with, UC and DWP. It's all skirting around the issue that people are being offered and taking loans and putting themselves in debt at a time when they don't maybe have the ability to think wider. Can I afford this loan, or what implications is this going to have for me? I think that the contingency fund issues, that discretionary support should be provided first. And I would also ask again, as I think we have all asked for over and over again, is can we please have a breakdown of the criteria that is provided to staff within the system that allows them to make their discretionary decisions? Because I believe that the discretion is part of the barrier here.
Okay, no, thank you for that, Kelly. I have Karen waiting to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just similar to Andy and Kelly, the contingency fund should be the first offering, and we know that it's not. I know the Minister would agree with that as well. And I welcome the review of the discretionary fund. I know it's an all review, but I know the Minister is keen to get this right, because as Kelly said, I know as a local MLA for many years I've been asking those questions. So we need to be supporting people at the first point of call, and it's the improvements that we expected to happen hasn't happened. So just concur with Kelly and Andy, and welcome the review. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Okay, there's a couple of proposals there from Andy and Kelly. Members happy enough with those proposals? Yes? Thank you.
Yes, please.
Andy, did you want to come in again?
If I can be a pain just to come back in, I don't know if others have had this issue, but I'm coming across an issue with people who, at the point of going on to universal credit, aren't aware that they need to apply for HC1 for help with healthcare costs, dental and optical support, and it's only at the point where they've then received that care do they realise that they had to apply through a process. Can we maybe write to the department for more information on that and ascertain how many people actually hadn't applied for HC1? I think then there's a healthcare certificate issued to them, which means then they get support with their healthcare costs in that respect.
Okay, no, Andy, thank you. We'll ask that as well, yeah, okay. All right, members, happy enough then we move on to the next item, which is at page 35, and that's a letter from the Charity Commission in relation to the review of complaints. The Charity Commission has appointed independent counsel to conduct a review of the complaints arising from the Commission's regulation of the Charities, Loughney Rescue and the Disabled Police Officers Association, to establish whether there are lessons the Commission can learn from the handling of the cases which have not yet been learned. The terms of reference for this review have been provided. Members, are you content to note or any comments? And this is just on the terms of reference; it's not on specifics. Andy?
Yeah. Declare an interest as a charity trustee.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Any comment on this at this stage? Or happy enough that we note that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, that's great.
Can I come back to this? I think it's maybe prudent that we as committee, I know this is obviously the department's approach to this, but I do know, and I think we've been sent correspondence from numerous different individuals who would highlight their concern with the way in which they've interacted or interfaced with the Commission, and it's important that obviously they have the opportunity to feed into the review. And I think we as a committee might want to consider what we want to do in terms of looking at things as well, but we can't obviously preempt the department's work.
Yeah, no, I know, and it has been something that has come up in committee time and time again, that we do want a briefing on the various issues to do with the Charities Commission, and I know that will happen, but I mean we could get a briefing on the terms of reference if you're interested in that, but I think at this stage it's other questions that we want to be asking. Yeah. So members, happy enough we move on from that, yeah? Okay. Okay, members, well done. We got 3 matters arising there within half an hour, so that was better than what I thought it was going to be. Can I ask members if you turn the agenda at item 5, and again I'm going to have to do a little bit of reading here, so if you just bear with me. It's the departmental responses to the raised paper on the licensing bill and response on the licensed premises mapping exercise. Members, you've been provided at page 41 with this response to questions from RAISE. The response highlights that there are a number of areas that we may wish to bear in mind going forward and some questions for future evidence sessions. For example, with the University of Stirling, where their research is seeking to address gaps in the evidence base on extended opening hours. The response indicates that the department is working with its professional services unit to develop an evaluation plan for the new licensing laws. Members, I propose we seek more information about this evaluation plan and also on any guidance documents in development. It will be important for us as we get to deliberations to be confident that there will be a robust monitoring and evaluation of the new law and good guidance will be in place. So I think that is vitally important that we hear where they are with that evaluation plan. Also, members, just on that part then, any comments on that part of the paper that I've just read? No, happy enough for me to go on. And members, just inform members that starting at page 50, they've been provided with the results of the departmental mapping exercise of licensed premises carried out in 2017. Maps of both Northern Ireland and for individual towns are included for off licences, hotels and pubs. Members of the Research Service of the Assembly had investigated the possibility of preparing similar maps further back in time for comparison. However, Reyes has advised the clerk that having contacted the Northern Ireland Courts and Tribunal Service, it will not be possible to compile I can't say that word, data, for example, from 2010, as these older records are paper-based only, and it would be a huge task to retrieve, search and compile this material manually. Reyes has received a large number of mainly PDF files from NICTS for 2018-19, but as little will have changed from the work done in 2017 by the department. I do not propose that we ask them to undertake this large amount of work to map the most recent 18-19 data. Are members content to use then the departmental mapping exercise as a recent picture of distribution of licensed premises? Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thanks very much for whoever did this work originally and for Reyes to bringing it to our attention. It is very comprehensive, and I imagine the people who were involved in its hearts were broke trying to find out the information. My concern is that this sort of highlights just how difficult it is to find out where all of our licence holders are. As Reyes has highlighted, you would have to go through each individual district court and go through all the petty sessions to find out where the licences are. It's shocking to think in this day and age that we don't have a compiled list, and other than these maps, this will be the first time that the committee has actually seen where hopefully this is a completely, it's a bit out of date, but it's as correct as we can get it. This where all the licensed premises are. It makes it extraordinarily difficult. I think that this is just some sort of a problem within the licensing system, that it's so disjointed, and while the department are bringing together the legislation, there must be a better way of managing and controlling and listing where all these premises are. How do you defend or protect an area if you're saying that there are lots of licensed premises there, if you can't actually get the evidence in your hand to show how many licenses are there? I think it's a thanks back to Reyes, for pulling this together, but it just raises concerns for me with this licensing legislation, that there still is no comprehensive gathering of the data or listing of the data on licence holders moving forward.
No, thanks for that, Kelly, and I agree with you somewhat on that. I wonder, I don't know if we asked the question, if individual councils hold a database for all of their licensed premises within their area, because they would need to have that information for their, what is it? Can't even remember which area it is. My brain is not working today, folks. Sorry about this. But I remember whenever I sat on council, we would have got, a lot of the legislation and the entertainment licenses and various different stuff would have come through council. So it's maybe worth asking. We could ask councils if they hold individual databases on each of their council areas on the issue, maybe. Robin?
Thank you, Chair. And I know this is only a very minor question, but the definition of an off licence.
Yeah.
If I look at page 99, off licences, Belfast 3, there are 2 off licences there. One is in George Best, Belfast City Airport, and the other is in some premises down at the docks. Presume it's with Stenaline or something of that nature. And those really aren't off licences as we understand off licences. I wonder if it's possible, Chair, just sort of a minor question in the overall context, but to get a definition of what an off licence actually is.
Okay.
How the public understands an off licence.
Yeah, off sales. Okay, no, we can ask that as well. Karen, did you want to come in again? No?
No, Chair. Thank
Your
you.
hand's still up, that's all. That's
No,
only asking.
okay.
No problem. Okay, members, then are we happy enough then that we move on from that? And again, thank you to Reyes, because I think it hadn't been for them, we wouldn't have known about this. They actually were able to find that out, so thank you. Then, members, just before we start our briefing session on the bill, there are a couple of related matters to discuss. First of all, members, can I ask our members in agreement that we now publish all of the submissions we have received on the bill on the Assembly website? Can I get agreement with that?
Agreed.
Great, thank you. And then, members, you're aware that there are a number of clauses in the bill that have an impact on young people, and a number of committees have worked with the engagement services over the past few months to successfully deliver virtual stakeholder events. The Clerk has done some initial work with the Assembly engagement team and has now suggested that we hold a virtual Zoom stakeholder event in early March to ensure we capture the views of young people. Now, members, this will take place in the evening, all being well, of Tuesday the 9th of March at 7 p.m, and that's because of a lot of the young people we don't want to eat into their school day. So the format will likely see young people split into small groups to share their views on the relevant elements of the bill, and the groups brought back into a central virtual space for feedback session. We would hope that members could attend and hear the feedback. Members, are you in agreement that the Clerk continues to develop this event with the engagement team?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yep.
Good stuff. Okay, thank you. All right, members, we're now going to move on to our evidence sessions. So I'll ask you then to turn to agenda item 6, where we will have the Wine and Spirit Trade Association briefing on the Licensing and Registration of Clubs Amendment Bill. You'll find this at page 183 of your meeting pack. And then can I welcome to the meeting Miles Beale. Miles, you're very welcome. I'm glad you could join us today. Could I ask you then to give some opening remarks and limit your time to 5 to 10 minutes, if that's okay? Miles, we can't hear you. So we're going to see if I don't know whether it's your end. You check.
Good morning, Brett.
I can hear you now. Yeah, I can hear you now, Miles.
Fantastic. Sorry, the bit that you missed was me checking whether you could hear me. So at least we know the technology is working. Apologies for that. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm sorry it has to be virtual. I've not been there for a while. I regret it maybe sometime before I am again. Having just come in at the end of the conversation, before I do my quick introduction, if it helps, a quick rule of thumb for the difference between off-trade and on-trade, it's purchase of a product for off-premise consumption or alternatively on-premise consumption. So that may help the committee a little in terms of the difference between off-trade and on-trade licences. Just quickly, Chair, thank you. I'll do a quick introduction, if I may. Just quickly want to set out who we are, who I represent, how we work, 5 key points in relation to the Licensing and Registration of Clubs Bill and its proposed amendments. What I will try and not to do is to repeat our written evidence, where I'm very happy to take any questions afterwards. First of all, the Wine and Spirit Trade Association, we are, as it says on the tin, a trade association and the largest one in the UK. We're unique in that we represent more than one type of product, so both wines and spirits, but also producers, retailers and all businesses at various points along the supply chain. In particular, we have a strong retail membership, most of, if not all of the large supermarkets, but also some of those things like wine clubs and those delivering direct to home. The way we try and work with lawmakers in whatever part of the UK and indeed occasionally beyond is to, certainly in giving evidence, to try and help lawmakers focus on what the aim of a bill or amendments are, whether the proposals being made are sort of sufficiently clear and targeted, and doing so we try and look at the evidence that we have seen across the UK and what it tells us, and in particular whether proposals are enforceable, workable and proportionate. So I'll try and summarise just quickly, I think, 5 main points that come out of our view of the amendments being proposed. First of all, summary, I'd say we're supportive of plans to modernise the licensing laws in Northern Ireland. We think that's probably overdue. However, we don't believe that all of the proposals are going to achieve the aims which are specifically about tackling alcohol misuse and promoting responsible consumption. So I'll try and flag some of those up, but as I said, the quick 5 points that I would flag are, number one, we're a little disappointed that the amendments fail to address what we think is the most fundamental issue in the licensing regime currently, and that's the requirement to have licensed tills in supermarkets. The 75 to 25 split, I understand, is pretty rigid, but the strong reasons we would suggest that needs to be included in scope are evidence, particularly recently from its relaxation, the advent of technology, some of it already in practice and lots of it coming, particularly with support of the Home Office in the UK, in London specifically. COVID and the experience of COVID, where the relaxation has happened and I think works very well, and finally alignment with England and Wales. I think our bottom line here is that the proposals to sort of ignoring this 75-25 split probably don't take account of the way a retailing operation happens currently, the way customers want to behave, and the fact that unlicensed tills are used very irregularly, and those who are under 18 tend to use new technology to a greater extent than others. Second main point, I think, would be around loyalty schemes, where we think there is a risk that the proposals being made are untargeted and would have unintended consequences, particularly because, bluntly, customers very much like loyalty schemes and local communities benefit heavily from them, particularly charitable giving. And of course, rewards are not instant, so we don't see or quite understand the reason and the rationale for trying to prohibit them. Point three, we think some of the proposals look like they don't fully understand the pretty stringent and robust safeguards that are in place for a business model where alcohol is delivered directly to home in leave safe areas, but deliveries directly to home where they could be collected by any member of the family, and probably over-exaggerates any risk there. There is very, very little evidence of any problems with minors collecting what will be thought-through purchases in advance by an adult of usually, certainly a lot larger than one bottle purchases. Fourth point, we think all aspects of selling and advertising alcohol are pretty heavily regulated and controlled. Recognition that retailers are very keen on self-regulation should be understood. We don't understand why there'd need to be additional regulatory controls, but I'm very happy to go into some detail on that. And finally, last point, before I finish an introduction, simply to say that we think there are significant benefits in Northern Ireland legislation being updated in line with that in England and Wales, and I could perhaps tell the committee a little bit about some of the proposals that the Home Office are looking into around the advent of technology and how that should be used to a greater extent for particularly age verification. There's quite a lot of that already, but there's a lot more to come and an initiative underway in London. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Miles. Thank you for that. I suppose it just take you back then to your first point of your 5 issues, and that's to do with the supermarket checkouts. Can you explain to us why we have, because I actually don't know the reason behind it, why it is a 75-25 split that we have here in Northern Ireland, and I do know that we did have the relaxation. I remember hearing it on a news bulletin a couple of months ago during COVID, that there was that relaxation, and that seemed to work pretty well. I haven't heard anything against how that worked. Just if you could just tell the committee why that is in place.
To be honest, I'm unable to explain it, only in that it's the only place in the UK where that separation exists. We don't see sort of statistical or evidence of different behaviour. I think it was aimed at encouraging customers, or rather perhaps discouraging them, adding alcohol to their shops, because then they wouldn't be able to go what would be assumed to be a shorter queue. In practice, we understand from our retailers that the 25% of tills that are not licensed tend to be, they have to be manned, but they are far less busy than the others. The benefit over the COVID experience of relaxing them is a better experience for customers, more efficient for stores to run. And we did a survey in advance of this session to see if there had been any problems with that system, any difficulties with perhaps underage purchases or problematic drinking as a result of purchases due to the changes, and found none.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I mean, I certainly, I know in my experience in any of the supermarkets that I shop in, that there will always be queues at those tills where the alcohol is sold, and generally very little. My understanding of it was always that here in Northern Ireland we have a great tradition of when you turn 16 and you're maybe staying on at school to do your A-levels, you get a job in your local supermarket, and therefore you would be unable to work on one of those tills because you're under 18. That was always my understanding, but I would imagine the vast majority of people that do work in our supermarkets are over the age of 18, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to me why there is that split. Then I just want to ask you then about the loyalty schemes. This has been brought up before in committee, so it has by other witnesses, and you talked there about the unintended consequences. I just want to ask you, to be brutally honest, in reality, do you see how this can possibly work whenever we're our supermarkets, for example, are part of larger supermarkets right across the UK and beyond, that we would have to have a very different type of loyalty card here? Is that really going to work in all honesty? Or will we'd be penalised and see that we don't have loyalty cards here in Northern Ireland for anything, whether that's Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer, Tesco's, wherever? Just give an honest opinion on that.
Look, I think the honest short answer is no. I don't see how it would work. I mean, if of course it becomes law, then our retailer members would have to do something different. But you're absolutely right. One of the options would be to remove any loyalty schemes at all, because that would be probably the simplest. I'm not sure that would be the outcome, or that's what they'd want, but it would be significantly easier to make no changes at all. It is worth saying that the Scottish Government did look at something similar, and in particular concluded that loyalty cards should be treated in the same way as cash. That is to say, no restrictions. They did distinguish coupons from vouchers, but in general terms for the supermarkets, these loyalty cards, you build up points and you're able to recoup the benefits and spend them on any products you like. And there's certainly no evidence that they are sort of spent disproportionately on alcohol. It's about all of the shopping that you might be able to do at a supermarket, and of course local community charities do benefit significantly as well. It's part of the retailer's offer to the community to give something back.
Okay, look, thank you for that. And just my last question to you then is around what you talked about there at the very end, was this new age verification technology. Just if you could give us just a snapshot of what that looks like.
Sure, yeah. So there is already a significant amount of technology, and this is particularly relevant to online retailers, so those that don't have any sort of high street or other street premise you can't visit a shop. They have very stringent arrangements in place for age verification at point of purchase, and that tends to be it takes a bit of time for the customer. It's become quicker. The technology is getting better. The new technology that I'm referring to, and where the Home Office has instigated, that they have what they're describing as a regulatory sandbox initiative, which I personally don't think sounds very attractive. But the idea is to start looking at different ways of providing age verification. I am on the board of something called the Proof of Age Standards Scheme that's looking at particularly standards around future practice. But to give the committee an example, it may soon be possible for individuals to have QR codes with which they can, at the same time as using a smartphone to purchase whatever their product is, in this case alcohol, they can also use the QR code to verify their age. In which case all of that is done technologically. Now that works just as well in store as it would online, and actually that is the bit that the Home Office is keen for the industry to help with, so that solutions are developed that sort of fit for the future. and not just for now. So I think the bottom line here is I think it's probably quite difficult to legislate in an area that is moving extremely quickly. Particularly if you're thinking about young people, they use this technology. The take-up of the technology is much faster. So I think anything that would be introduced along the lines proposed in the current bill, the current amendments, would be out of date incredibly quickly, and of course not in line with England and Wales, where some of these things are being looked at currently.
Okay, thank you, Miles, for that. Members, I have Karen and then I have Mark waiting to come in. So any other members, can they press their hands up button? So I'll go to you, Karen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Miles, for your presentation. I just wanted to come on and say it's important for me to raise the good work that was undertaken by Retail and Alcohol Standards Group in regards to the Community Alcohol Partnership in Derry, which was up until 2013. I worked for an organisation, Bogside and Brandywell Health Forum, and we had a project, Drink Think. And I know of many other groups that was involved, and it was great work that was done at that time. I know you said in your paper it would be something that you would look at, coming back to in terms of more community alcohol partnerships here, and I do think that that's what we need to look at and continue on that work. The Chair touched a bit on, I wanted to ask around the loyalty scheme. You had said around the bill has fallen short to consider the wider community and charity benefits. Just Miles, I wouldn't be aware of, apart from the loyalty scheme that you get yourself, your card in the supermarket, I wouldn't be aware, obviously, of the wider community benefits. Could you give us a wee bit more detail on that, what it looks like? What is the benefits, what groups get, what charities would benefit, and how it works?
Yes, I can give you. It's probably only limited because each supermarket and retailer do it differently, and they do it differently in different communities. But the sort of common threads are that as far as I'm aware, all of the loyalty schemes allow those supermarkets to make donations locally, and they're very keen on doing it locally. Some, for example, the Co-op have, I think, a minimum amount that they provide in terms of percentage to the local community, but they're all sort of tailored to the local community, and it's the community that benefits. So there's a direct relationship between the health of the business in a particular area and the charitable benefit the other side of business being conducted. I think what our retailer members are particularly worried about is that if this legislation came through, I don't know whether it would go as far as the Chair has suggested, and the loyalty schemes would be ended completely. But certainly you would expect, because it's all proportionate to the amount of business done and the amount of interactivity on the loyalty scheme, the donating would definitely reduce, so there would be less available to the community. It doesn't appear to me that that's being considered in putting these amendments together.
Thank you, Miles.
Just one last point, Karen, if I may. Community alcohol partnerships continue to do incredibly well in England, Wales, and actually increasingly well in Scotland. Yes, I'm also one of the directors on community alcohol partnerships, and certainly I'm very, very happy to reiterate the offer. We'd be very keen to see community alcohol partnerships increase in number in Northern Ireland as well. So if we can help with that, and for the benefit of the other members of the committee, community alcohol partnerships are set up locally with sort of seed corn funding from community alcohol partnerships, the organisation, to tackle underage drinking and associated disbenefits to the local community. We find they're extremely effective, and we'd certainly be happy to have a look at any proposed areas. So if anyone on the committee has areas where they have problems with underage drinking in particular, we'd be very happy to look at it. The Derry Cat was extremely successful, so successful that it wound up, if you like, which is a strange way of looking at success, but very happy to look at that further with any members of the committee.
It was, Miles. It was actually excellent, and what it did was, I think it built and formed relationships And I think that was the success of it, probably, in it winding up, because those relationships have continued on and the great work, and people can pick up the phone and if there is a problem and work together. So I know that that's continuing, but thank you very much, Miles, for the update.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Can I bring Mark in? Mark Durkin?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Miles, for coming along today, and thank you for your written submission as well that I was having a wee look at last night. So correct me if I've picked this bit up wrong from it. But you say in your written submission that there's no evidence that alcohol advertising affects consumption levels or antisocial behaviour. So just to take the first point on consumption, that would kind of beg the question, then what's the point of advertising alcohol at all? So could I just clarify that? You know, are you saying that there's no evidence whatsoever, or that you don't dispute evidence that advertising alcohol causes or correlates with increased sales and consumption?
So, to be clear, there is no evidence that there is a link at all between advertising and harmful consumption. And that is what
so it's harmful.
and the bill is. Sorry.
Oh no, sorry, Miles. No, it's just I don't think the word harmful was in the written submission.
Well, sorry, that's the aim of the bill. So, agree. We don't see any relationship between advertising and harmful consumption.
Okay, thank you. And then could you say maybe just a wee bit more about how implementing additional age checks upon delivery would lead to a substantial increase in costs for suppliers? And has there been any research done on the amount that you would project such verifications would cost?
So that last point is the most difficult to answer. Look, I think we think there's a misunderstanding of how much pre-purchase age verification and requirements are undertaken by any of our retailers. Then it depends on the retailer's business model. But for example, for a large supermarket, they now train their drivers in the Challenge 25 initiative, which was set up by the Retail of Alcohol Standards Group, who I'm here to represent. So a driver is trained in exactly the same way as a store worker would be, a store employee, to check if anyone looks under 25 before they are able to purchase the alcohol. Of course, when it's delivered at home, it's already been purchased, but they have been trained in the same way. So, they're trained to ask the right questions. Where it becomes more difficult is for online businesses who have a third party delivering for them. They, as previously described, have extremely stringent tests pre-purchase, but they're online and it's about who is purchasing the alcohol. For them, it would be incredibly expensive to introduce some additional check. It's a third party often who's delivering the product, and they're not trained in the same way, and of course they're not a direct employee of the company. So it's for that type of business in particular for whom it will be extremely expensive. We're also very unclear if there's evidence that this is at all a problem. Typically those sorts of business that I've just described, whoever is purchasing is likely to be purchasing. They probably can't purchase less than a minimum number of bottles, 6 or 12. If it's wine, that's unlikely to be something that somebody in a household is ordering and wouldn't be watching out for. Under what sort of circumstances would a minor be collecting those? Well, possibly if the individual is self-isolating perhaps, or unwell or disabled. Anyway, we think the risk is incredibly low that would lead to problematic drinking by particularly a minor. In terms of the actual costs, it definitely depends on the business model, but it's as much about, could you, if the risk is low, how would you make it even lower? And that might result in someone needing to be there on the spot, which is definitely cost prohibitive, and we would certainly say completely disproportionate to the problem, where the evidence tells us that there is no problem at all.
No, I don't underestimate the difficulty of this, and you don't want to overburden drivers or delivery people either. It sort of reminds me of an incident one time when I was canvassing and I went to a door, and a young fella, he must have been 14 or 15, answered, and he had a bottle of beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other, and I asked him, are there any adults in? And he replied, does it look like it? So just one final wee question, Miles. We've taken a lot of evidence from local alcohol suppliers who support licences for tap rooms. Do you have any view on that?
Actually, I'm not sure I know exactly what a tap room would be in a Northern Irish context, but if it's the same as the on-off premise distinction, so this is for consumption on premise.
Yes, sorry.
So I think, probably not, in that most of my members do not run licensed operations for on-premise activity, but in general, provided the on-premise activity is run appropriately as a bar or a pub or a club or a restaurant would be, then you would expect there to be someone with responsibility and training in place to ensure that the license, the terms of the license are stuck to, and people are drinking responsibly in that venue. Okay,
no, that's useful. Thank you very much, Miles.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I have no other members I can see here with their hands up, but I'm going to give a wee moment to see if anybody does put their hand up. Nope, nobody wants to ask any further questions. That's okay. All right, Miles, look, thank you very much for your briefing. Some interesting points made there. Thank you. Oh, hold on, Sinead has put her hand up. I'm going to bring Sinead in. Sorry. Sinead?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just couldn't get my hand raised there quick enough. Yeah, I just want to follow on from Mark's point there. I just find it slightly concerning, that piece in your evidence there where you said no evidence has been provided showing there is a link between alcohol advertising and increased consumption, when, I've just done a quick Google search and, there's any amount of research papers which show that there is a link, especially among young people who are exposed to alcohol advertising at a young age. And we know there's a link between those that already have or who are already suffering with an alcohol-related problem and advertising. So I'm just concerned about that assertion in the written submission, and there's no evidence. Certainly, you haven't provided any evidence to back up your claim. So I'm just a wee bit concerned that that's maybe just slightly misleading.
Well, let me try and clear that up as best I can. We don't have any evidence of a direct link. And by that I mean, can anyone provide any evidence that there's advertising that results in immoderate or excessive consumption? I think what we do know very well is that those who drink most irresponsibly are least responsive to influence in their behaviour. So, for example, we often have conversations about whether price makes a difference. A very large amount of alcohol, immoderate alcohol consumption, is consumed by a very small element of the population. In Northern Ireland, I don't know exactly what the figures are compared with the UK, but the problem there is a changing behaviour of a minority. So that's where the evidence is very clear. For young people, I think one of the problems we have with this, the proposals to amend the bill, are they talk, what advertising are we proposing not being allowed within 200 metres of a store? Because if a store is not allowed to advertise, and if you're a farm shop, for example, and you produce some of your own products, does this prevent you from advertising within 200 metres? And does it prevent a competitor from advertising within 200 metres of your store? So I think there are things that you can do, and there are plenty of examples around the UK of if you want to do something on advertising, some of the things that you could look at, but the evidence for what works is really not there. The additional element I think we point to quite strongly is the self-regulation of the alcoholic drinks industry in the UK is sort of used as an example by other industries. It's extremely strong, and it's particularly focused on those under 18. So the evidence that the way the alcoholic drinks industry regulates itself to prevent advertising to minors has a very, very strong effect. So it's the we drink across the UK, we drink fully a fifth less alcohol now than we did 15 years ago. That's fallen fastest, so more than 20% amongst the under 26. So I think the evidence is very strongly that those under 26 are the cohort that are least affected and least likely to drink.
Can't hear you, Sinead.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, I've just done a quick Google search there, and there's any amount of articles, some which are sponsored by the British government, some which are EU-based research, which will contradict the submission in your written submission there. So, and I think again we're getting back to this issue in terms of advertising. We've had it at least 3 weeks now, where there's a slight confusion around what the bill actually proposes in terms of advertising, and it wouldn't be that larger supermarkets would gain a competitive advantage over smaller farm shops, for example. The bill proposes to apply the restrictions on advertising across the board, whether you're an ASDA or whether you're a smaller producer, in terms of being able to advertise within, what does it say here, within, I can't find it here, but it's within so many metres from your store. So it's not that there would be any competitive advantage for anyone else. The bill proposes to apply that across the board, fairly. So I think we just need to make sure that we're just really understanding what actually the bill proposes in terms of that.
Yes, I definitely agree with that last one. I'm very happy to look at the evidence you suggest. If you want to send it to us, I'm happy to give you a view. We certainly agree that the proposals are not clear. So what you can and can't do within 200 metres of your or someone else's store, which implies to me, with the greatest respect, that it might not have been thought through properly. And the second thing I think is around, what exactly, is the definition of advertising here? So what about non-alcoholic products or lower alcohol products that share the same brand as an alcoholic product, or it's glassware rather than alcohol, or clothing? So I think that's some of the thing, some of the elements of the bill and the amendments that are not clear to us, and it's quite difficult to engage on that. As I say, the full gambit of kind of restrictions and the way companies behave according to ASA, CAP, the Portman Group, the work that we do through DrinkAware, I think all of those self-regulatory elements don't appear to have been taken into account with the drafting of the bill. So I think we would need to understand a bit more detail about what is being proposed, because I agree with you, it's not clear.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Miles.
Okay, thanks, Sinead. Okay, no other members have indicated that they want to come in. So, Miles, again, can I say a very big thank you? Sorry, Miles, do you want to come back and say something?
Well, Chair, there was just one thing that no one has raised, whether the committee might be able to help us actually, but there's an amendment or a proposal for an amendment related to vending machines. Yeah. And that's an area where we're extremely unclear what the aim is, because what is the definition of a vending machine? So if I just give two examples, if there were a sort of somewhere in a supermarket, a space where you could free pour some alcohol to test or try it, I think we would worry about that, but it simply doesn't exist. Whereas if you were thinking about a sort of a drop box, so for example, now you often have in supermarkets, some lockable cabinets where your shopping can be picked and left for you, and then you come along with a code, and it's a unique code and it's changed every time, and you pick up your shopping there, and it might include alcohol. We think that if that was within scope of a vending machine, that would be a very bad proposal, because that of course is a way of improving a service, and certainly, with things like COVID, that is a better way than queuing up with a whole load of others in front of cash tills. So we would really need to understand what is in scope with a vending machine to be able to comment in more detail on that proposal.
Okay, look, thank you for that, Miles. I hadn't, no one else has brought that issue up around that sort of click and collect style that more and more of us are using in our supermarkets. So that is something then that we can then ask the department around that. As I say, that's the first that's been brought up. So thank you for highlighting that issue. Look, thank you again, Miles. Really interesting evidence session. So thank you for your time today.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, members, at this stage, I just propose a very quick comfort break before we move on to our next session. Sorry, but before we do that, Robin wants to come in and say something.
No, just Miles raised work being done by the Home Office on age identification.
Yeah.
It might be useful for us to try and understand what that work includes and where it is in terms of Home Office progression of the work.
Yeah, and I think that's probably not a bad idea, actually, because he did say, whenever I asked him the question around it, that some of our regulations, or some of our legislation will be null and void because of it, so it might be an idea to see where that is, and have the department looked at that information as well. No, that's okay. Members, again, just propose a very short break, and then we'll be back soon.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly.
Okay, members, we're going to move on then to agenda item 7, which is a briefing from Tourism NI, again on the Licensing and Registration of Clubs Amendment Bill. You'll find the papers for this agenda item at page 193 of your meeting pack. Can I then welcome Gary Quaid and Rosemary McHugh to the meeting? Yep, we've got them in. Gary, I think it's yourself that is going to begin the briefing, and you have up to 10 minutes to brief the committee, so please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. Just checking everyone can hear me okay?
We can indeed, Gary.
Okay, listen, thanks very much. Tourism and I are delighted to be here today to offer evidence in relation to the proposed bill amendments and really to demonstrate how changes to those proposals have the potential to enhance the attractiveness of Northern Ireland as a tourism destination. So my name's Gary Quaid, and I'm the Food and Drink Experience Development Officer at Tourism NI. And I'm joined today by Rosemary McHugh, who is the Director of Product Development within the organisation. And committee members will be aware that Tourism NI have been supportive of changes to liquor licence legislation since the original consultation in 2012. And we believe that the introduction of a number of measures that are proposed within the bill has the potential to provide vital support to businesses and to help rebuild our tourism and hospitality industry in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. So our submission to this consultation really focuses on those aspects of the licensing laws that we feel with greater flexibility can facilitate further tourism development and improvement of the experience that we offer to our visitors. And this includes the proposals to modernise the licensing laws around the Easter period, which is a key holiday in the tourism calendar for Northern Ireland. The proposed introduction of the producer's licence to support our award-winning distillers, brewers and cider producers right across the country, in addition to recognising the contribution that events have played in the growth and the visibility of Northern Ireland. And I'd like to, I feel at this point that it's really important to highlight that tourism in Northern Ireland reached a significant milestone in 2019, where there were over 5 million overnight trips taken, and for the first time, associated spend with these trips broke the £1 billion barrier. But in order for us to rebuild our tourism industry in a post-COVID environment, it requires us to be continuously reflective and challenging of our tourism offer to make sure that we're meeting and managing the expectations of our visitors, both at home and those travelling from abroad. And we know that food and drink is an essential part of that tourism offer and is a key element of the holiday experience. because our research continues to tell us that food and drink consumption accounts for almost 350 million per year, which equates to around 1/3 of annual visitor spend, and that this number continues to grow. Northern Ireland has been on a transformative food and drink journey over the past 5 years. We've had the massive success of the 2016 Year of Food and Drink Initiative, which really put us on the world stage and did much to enhance our reputation as a world-class food and drink destination. And ultimately, this success led to Northern Ireland being awarded the prestigious accolade of Best Food Destination at the World Travel Awards in 2018. We have a strong history of distilling and brewing, and the growth in craft drink production is revitalising our local communities and creating jobs right across Northern Ireland. But for the most part, unless you're covered by an appropriate or an occasional licence, our producers are unable to sell directly to the consumer. So currently, if a tourist visits a distillery, they might have had the opportunity to sample the products, but they're unable to purchase directly from the producer. And this is a really frustrating experience for both the visitor and the business owner. And in most cases, visitors will have travelled some distance to take a distillery tour or an experience that's centred in and around drink production. They'll have had the opportunity to meet the makers and the people behind the brand, but are prohibited under current legislation to buy a bottle as a gift or as a souvenir of their time in Northern Ireland. And that likelihood of a purchase whilst on the premises is much greater than that of a chance encounter in the nearest off licence, or if we're lucky enough, an online purchase when they arrive home again. But that online sale then brings with it third-party markups, which are detrimental for a small craft drinks producer. So the ability for visitors to purchase on site isn't just highly desirable, but tourists and our visitors expect the opportunity to do this. So we are supportive of an introduction of a producer's licence that would permit our craft drink sector to be able to sell products directly to the consumer as part of their visitor experience, but also at festivals and events across Northern Ireland. But at this point, we'd also like to draw attention to the opportunity to support and develop the microbrewery sector. We believe that the proposals within the bill could go a little further to support producers who may wish to innovate, to develop new tourism experiences and potential future revenue streams. And we feel that the current proposal would prohibit the opportunities for on-premises consumption, and that it's potentially restrictive in enabling this growing market who might want to diversify to look at creating a taproom experience, particularly for the tourism market, that has an opportunity to motivate visitors to travel, to stay longer, and to spend a little bit more in Northern Ireland. And we've conducted extensive research into the needs and the motivations of our close-to-home markets, where the availability of food and drink experiences and the opportunity to meet these makers continue to dominate the factors in the decision-making to travel. And we feel at Tourism NI that if the proposals were extended to permit direct-to-consumer sales, it would help consolidate our efforts and our objectives to further develop tourism experiences that will support regional spread right across all parts of Northern Ireland, that have the ability to extend the tourism season and hopefully the opportunity to build and create a more vibrant and sustainable local economy. I'd like to thank you, Chair, and the committee for the time this morning. We're happy to take any questions that you might have in relation to the written submission and this morning's oral evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you for your submission and for coming to brief us today. I absolutely agree with you. I think we have a wonderful offering here in Northern Ireland when it comes to tourism. As you were talking there, I was minded of those pre-COVID days down in St George's Market on a Sunday morning, where you would have heard accents from not only all over the UK and Ireland, but all over the world, of people that were coming to Northern Ireland. And I also remember looking at a TripAdvisor post around an Easter weekend of people that had come here for Easter weekend, and it was like, what do you do on a Sunday in Northern Ireland? The shops don't open at a certain time and the bars only open at a certain time. So there were issues around that, I remember well. Just around the Easter opening, and I know that you would be very much in favour of the removal of those restrictions. We have heard from the Presbyterian and Methodist churches and Unite the Union about people of faith having to work over the Easter weekend. Have you any comment that you can make on that? Albeit that I do understand greatly the requirement for the easement of those restrictions when it comes to our tourism model.
Yeah, Chair. Easter is a significant holiday for the tourism calendar in Northern Ireland, and we would be supportive of relaxation of the hours, and particularly around the time when visitors have made the decision to travel to Northern Ireland, or in the case now, very much to stay at home and to support the local economy, by taking a sort of staycation. But we have to take a very balanced approach, and the scrutiny of the bill is very important. But Tourism and I, we believe that the removal of these restrictions can, I suppose, enhance the attractiveness of Northern Ireland as a modern tourism destination. And you spoke a little there, sort of the pre-COVID days, but also moving forward, Chair. It's going to be a very competitive marketplace in the months and years ahead, and from a tourism perspective, we feel that the removal of those restrictions will, I suppose, bolster Northern Ireland's competitive and the growth of the tourism and hospitality sector. But also, there's concern that if we don't look at that particular framework now, is that Northern Ireland could be placed at a competitive disadvantage, particularly when we're looking to ROI or other close-to-home destinations of choice who have made those legislative changes to permit extended hours over Easter trading. So for us, it's really about managing those visitor expectations and going back to some of that research, Chair, where our visitors are telling us that, particularly on Sundays, and I picked up on the visitor attitude survey that we're not actually meeting expectations of visitors who are travelling to Northern Ireland during the Easter period.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Just then want to ask you about the issue around major events. I know that you would be supportive of giving those powers to the department around major events. Have you any concerns about how those events might be defined?
Chair, yes, not so much concerns, but I think our events play a significant role in the promotion and the development of Northern Ireland, and previous events might have been impacted by the lack of ability to vary sort of hours for the sale of consumption of alcohol, where it fell outside of the remit. But I suppose Tourism NI's message is that we would like to see a framework around special events or major events that again can help Northern Ireland come out on the front foot sort of post-pandemic. And the commitment from Tourism NI, Chair, is that we would continue to be very supportive of those ongoing conversations in terms of what does that framework look like, and what does it look like actually when it's applied on the ground. So I suppose there's a commitment from our perspective to very much work with the department and to try and roll that out and make sure that it does support Northern Ireland's transformative journey. The phenomenal success of the Open in 2019, the Giro, the MTV Europe Music Awards, all those great events that we've delivered on. And I think we've got a real opportunity now to take some of those learnings, but actually to apply them to Northern Ireland and to see how we can move forward and stronger as a destination that can continue to attract that inward investment.
I think you're absolutely right. It's just when you mentioned some of those events, they seem like a lifetime ago now. Some of those major events that we held here and were held here so successfully. So I suppose as a country looking forward as well, we need to look at how we what we do and to boost people's confidence and to get people out there again attending events. So I think it's vitally important that we get this right in this legislation. I'm going to open up, Gary, now to some of the members. I've got Mark, then I have Sinead, and then I have Alex. So if I can ask Mark to come in.
Thank you, Gary, and Rosemary. Thank you, Chair. Gary, you just listed some of the great events that you've been involved in the delivery of, and I'm sure yourselves as an organisation and even as individuals are extremely frustrated that you haven't been able to do any of that vitally important and that's, dare say, ultimately enjoyable pieces of work over the past year, and we look forward to you getting back to doing what you do extremely well. Now, this bill has taken on a new dimension and urgency given the financial issues the pandemic's caused and the threat that it's posed to the industry, both in terms of patrons here and, of interest to you, of course, tourists. Now, Hospitality Ulster did research in 2016 that suggested this was on the Easter liquor licensing restrictions, that they were costing £16 million to our economy, and they suggested they could now be up to £20 million following the changes in the South in 2018. I don't know if Tourism NI done any research on the economic impact of that the current licensing framework has on tourism, or is it something that you might consider doing?
I think, Mark, it's a really good point, and Hospitality Ulster very much taking the lead in that space in terms of direct impacts to the hospitality businesses. From a tourism perspective, Mark, there are a number of proposals that are outlined in the bill that we haven't, I suppose, been able to consolidate what that opportunity might look like, because we haven't had the opportunity maybe to move into that space before. So when we're picking up elements of the bill, very much in support of producers being able to sell direct, and it's because they haven't had the opportunity to do that we can't really, I suppose, quantify what that leakage or what that loss potentially looks like. But and all of the great stuff, Mark, that you've picked up on in terms of even the events and the delivery. It's important that Tourism and I have delivered that in addition to working with a number of stakeholders there that you've mentioned. So it's very much about sharing that information and about bringing that totality to the department in terms of identifying what the loss has been in and around that significant Easter period, but also about what the opportunities are to say, well, if we can come out now on the front foot post-pandemic and really support our industry to tap into new experience development and new revenue streams potentially off the back of that, it would be really great, for us to capture what the gaps in the bill proposal, in terms of how this might work and how it translates. So hopefully then, Mark, yes, we as an organisation would be very keen to showcase what the positive changes to the bill have directly resulted in tourism and increased revenue.
Just to add to what Gary has said there, while our research doesn't look at the quantification of the economic losses, I mean what our research mainly focuses on is I suppose the visitor expectation, and I suppose what we do know is that food and drink is such a significant driver in visitors' choice of destination, one of the top 5 factors. I think the other bit that we know from our research as well is that we in Northern Ireland, while tourism has grown significantly, we have a huge opportunity to extract more value from every visitor who comes to Northern Ireland. And as Gary just mentioned here, it's about, I suppose, developing those high quality experiences that can really, I suppose, deliver value into the economy through enhanced spend by every visitor. And some of these proposals and the modernisation and flexibility have the real opportunity to do that. So to really drive up the value we get from every interaction or visitor engagement.
No, it is all about driving value, and then I'll have to relook, I think, at these Hospitality Ulster figures just to see, obviously, their business is hospitality, but are their figures based solely on like accommodation, food and drink? Because I know that's a prime factor in people deciding to come here or stay here, but people spend money on a lot more than food and drink when they are here, and if they stay an extra night, they'll be out about the town the next day and buy this, that and the other, and help all sorts of other local businesses. Gary outlined there Tourism NI support for a local producer's licence and the logic behind that, which I agree with entirely. I don't know if you guys have been following our evidence gathering over the past number of weeks and months now even, but the department has, albeit in a cursory manner, suggested to us that tap rooms might adversely affect existing licensed premises. as if it's some sort of zero-sum game rather than helping to create a more vibrant and attractive environment that benefits the whole industry and the whole area. I was wondering, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Just picking up on that, Mark, from our perspective, this is about the ability, I suppose, to develop the sector to create those new and compelling experiences and to try and motivate people to travel. As I said, across all parts of Northern Ireland. I think there is an opportunity, Mark, for us really to look at that and to see if there is, I suppose, a sensible approach or an opportunity for the industry really to get talking in and around the opportunities of taproom creation. I think it's important at this point to say or to suggest that not everyone that has the ability to create a taproom experience will want to do it. Those businesses, I suppose, will need to have done research in and around viability. How much potentially would it cost businesses to move into that space? What does that regulatory framework look like? But I think it's about exploring opportunities to maybe level the playing field a little bit from a tourism and an experiential perspective, whereby the craft breweries and the craft drink sector are really going after that niche market. These are visitors that are highly motivated to travel to find out a little bit more about the product, where it's produced, how it's produced, opportunities really to uncover those stories in and around sort of flavour profiles, what kind of ingredients are being used, what's unique to Northern Ireland, what's unique about the processes or the methods that are used, and all of that, Mark. When we look at it, there's real opportunities, I suppose, to pass all of that knowledge on to visitors. And what is the opportunity now for us, for those that maybe do want to move into that space? It needs to be a viable business proposition for them. Whether they want to move down, to move into that space. But we would very much, from a tourism perspective, be keen to see if the conversations with industry could be ignited in and around. Well, what does that framework look like? What are the responsibilities potentially on craft brewers that want to develop a taproom experience for the tourism and for the very niche markets, and really understand that holding a license for any alcohol consumption comes with some level of responsibility. But I think there are opportunities for conversations there. Our research tells us, and we know that experiential tourism, Mark, is going to be so important for our recovery, sort of post-COVID. It's about looking at what other destinations offer, but it's about almost saying, well, what are the opportunities here for Northern Ireland? How can we almost rebound stronger? How can we look at all that research and the opportunities in and around driving up that value, driving up that visitor spend, which Rosemary has alluded to? And I think there's great opportunity to explore that a little bit more.
You'd sort of think that the more strings to our bow, the better, in terms of a visitor experience and then bringing people here for that.
I think, Mark, it's about offering variety and offering choice. And I know that we've touched on this in other sessions, but it's about that support for local. Our home market is probably our biggest opportunity in terms of storytelling, driving experiences, tapping into additional revenue streams. But it's, when we look at it, it is quite a barrier for some of the small producers. So how can we make sure that money is going back into the local economy? What are the potential benefits to looking at tap rooms and the whole tourism element in terms of job creation and local investment and localism, and that circular economy we've heard a lot of over the past number of weeks and months. And I think that the COVID pandemic has totally changed how we view the quality of our food and drink, so that when the supply chains were interrupted in those sort of early months, and our producers worked so hard, I suppose, to get us access to great quality food. And I think there's a real drive and a movement now towards really supporting our industry as we move out of this. But how can we use tourism and experiences as the hook? What is the additionality? Where are the opportunities to encourage people to travel, to hear about those stories, and have the opportunity to transact and to increase dwell time on the back of that?
and if people are travelling here for that experience, it's unlikely that they'll confine their trip solely to tap rooms. They will be benefiting for the wider economy and other pubs and hospitality venues out there as well.
Yeah, I think we've heard that balance, Mark, and as I say, just because the permissions might be there for the craft sector to look at that diversification into tap rooms, not everyone wants to do it. Not everyone wants to move into that space. But
This isn't there for them at the moment, and it's not even in this draft bill. So
I think it's about the choice, not only for businesses, Mark, but also for visitors. I work very closely with the sector, Mark. I'm the Food and Drink Experience Development Officer, so it's my job to get out with industry and to talk about the opportunities in and around tourism, and particularly for the craft drink sector. They don't really see that fit between product and tourism as yet. And a lot of those that are offering tours, they're doing it from a brand awareness perspective. Because they can't sell direct to the consumer, and that captive audience is, as I suppose, left the building without any additional cash in the till. They're not making huge margins from putting on the tours and a sort of 90-minute or 2-hour visit in and around the distillery. So I feel, taking a really balanced and approach to the bill proposals, that there's great scope to tap in to those producers and to really start to drive that experiential element forward.
okay, thank you, Gary. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I've got Sinead, then Alex, then Kelly. So can we bring in Sinead?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, guys. Listen, Mark's covered majority of what I wanted to talk to you about in terms of the taproom issue, and I fully concur with what Gary has said there in terms of this bill and the tourism sector more broadly being a massive tool for us in terms of emerging from COVID and building back our economy. It's going to be a massive. This is going to be a massive part of it, and I think that's why it's incumbent on us as a committee to really to get a move on, basically in terms of scrutinising this and hopefully bringing it forward through the Assembly. As I said, Mark's covered a lot of it, but I think certainly in South Down, we have lots of tap rooms, lots of craft brewers, and we're sort of, I think we're really well placed in terms of, right on the shores of Carningford Lough, our location, and the emergence of all the craft brewers who have told me that they've had tour buses pulling up outside the brewery, expecting to get a tour, expecting to get a sample. And they're having to be turned away. So that's something we just can't afford to happen in the time ahead, not if we want to compete with other tourist destinations. So I know you were saying to Mark there that you can't estimate the economic impact of not having these taproom experiences, or these being able to buy directly from the producers, but is that something that you're getting in terms of feedback from visitors, that they're disappointed that they can't have that experience here? Is it something, is that an expectation when visitors come here? Because I know certainly locally, as I said, we've experienced it here, but more broadly, is that the feedback from tourists that they're saying, we're disappointed we can't have this experience? And if that was, if there was an amendment in the bill to introduce that, is it something that Tourism NI would be, because obviously you're going to have a marketing strategy around it, you're going to have to, be able to promote it. So is that something that you guys are thinking about?
Yeah, in terms of feedback, Sinead, from visitors, it's from visitors and business owners alike that feedback comes from. And when we talk about sort of the year of food and drink and best food destination and the Taste the Island initiatives that Tourism and I have been propelling forward with, we have done a lot to, I suppose, push media, journalist visits out throughout Northern Ireland. And again, when we're bringing media and journalists, and we want them to write about the great quality of our food and drink, which Sinead, you have alluded to that you have in your constituency in abundance, and I know that from my work with the sector. But there's disappointment there that we can't actually showcase that. If we were taking media, we work very closely with Food NI, with bringing in even international buyers in and around some of these events, and there are barriers there, even from a showcase perspective, to say that, look, we can't sell you anything. There are no opportunities for you to taste. When they're leaving Northern Ireland, they can allude to, I suppose, these great producers and these great makers, but we're not actually bridging that gap. And I think, using tourism, using experiences, Sinead, and going back to your point in terms of, will we focus in terms of strategy, will we put some development opportunities in and around the craft drink sector? We certainly will, and there's a commitment there for tourism and I suppose to really work with the sector to bring those experiences to the fore. But it's difficult at the moment when they can't sell direct to consumer. They're not sure what the tourism benefits are to their business, and in some cases there's been quite low levels of engagement. So if certain proposals were introduced, we would be keen as an organisation to go and pick that up and to run forward with the potential.
Yeah. Sinead, it's a very interesting point that you raise in terms of tour buses and visitors coming, because I suppose what we do know, while we mightn't, as I say, have quantified the potential economic losses of this, while Northern Ireland has come a long way, we still have a huge amount of work to do in terms of those experiences that really stimulate demand for Northern Ireland and also enhance the experience when visitors are here, which we get continuous feedback from our visitor attitude surveys. I think overall, I would say we have come a long way, but we need to have a huge raft of these really authentic quality experiences. There is a lot done, but a lot still needed to do. And I suppose it comes to the point of, stimulating private sector investment in the development of tourism experiences, whether that is food and drink or otherwise. And I think, Gary alluded to, I suppose, the work that he is doing across the sector. And I think there's probably, two elements that probably give you some indication of that. Gary probably works very closely with about 15 distillers, or a group of around 15 distillers across Northern Ireland. As he mentioned, our engagement with the microbrewers, of which there are many now popping up, probably in and around 20. But Gary can correct me on that one. But our engagement is very low in relation to those, and that's probably very much around the opportunity or the lack of opportunity for revenue streams and for viability and sustainability in terms of really moving into that tourism space. So I think there is a real opportunity in here around development of experiences, but experiences in that domain. I think the key point is around how can that be done in a fair, proportionate and fit for purpose manner that can deliver on those objectives, but to do it proportionally and in a fit for purpose way.
Nope. Sinead's gone, so she has.
I wasn't sure whether it was me that was gone or Sinead that was gone there.
Sinead has dropped off, I think, so she has. Let me just look at the screen here. She has. Thank you. I'll move on then to our next question is from Alex. And if Sinead comes back in, I'll bring her in again. Alex?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Hear you now. Yeah. Yes, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, Gary, thank you both for your presentation, and Gary, thank you for the positive language that you're using, and I particularly like the way you mentioned about enhancing the attractiveness of Northern Ireland. So I think that's a very positive thing to be doing and trying to do for the future too. So that was quite refreshing. So thank you. I've a quick question. Your support for the bill, and as the bill stands at the moment, it will obviously have a benefit for the economy and jobs and tourism and stuff like that. Is there any rough estimates how much this could help the economy, potential new jobs, and how many new tourists this could potentially attract if it's got right? Have you anything you could give us in that in terms of?
I think it's a very good question, Alex. It's not one obviously that we have all the answers to at the moment, because a lot of what's proposed within the bill is in and around the opportunity, and we have been on this sort of transformative journey, particularly from the food and drink perspective since 2016. And we've done monumental things within the parameters of the legislation that we could work with. And I suppose, it is about just saying, well, what can we do further? How can we sort of bolster all of that great work that has been done? And it goes back to, really uncovering and unlocking those new tourism experiences and driving those forward, Alex, and hopefully then that starts to translate into cash in the tills, X in terms of job creation and overnight stays and spending additional. So, if the bill proposals as they stand or as they're developed or are introduced, that Tourism and I would be able to look at our visitor attitude survey, look at all of our consumer sentiment and research, and bring that to the department at a much later stage to say that, I suppose pre-COVID or pre-bill being introduced, that food tourism and job creation linked to that was X, but actually now that we have seen some of these positive measures maybe embedded within local communities, that that we could bring that information to you. So it is a little bit, Alex, we don't have it, but it's about what the opportunity is in and around that, and we would be very supportive of putting some measures and some quantities in and around that to report back to the department about the direct impacts that the bill has had on tourism, job creation, and creating a more sustainable local tourism economy.
Yeah, there are a number of different ways to look at it as well, and I suppose important context. Gary had mentioned the headline figures of 1 billion and 350 million per annum on food and drink. So almost a third of the overall revenue. I think one of the key things around the development in particular of food and drink experiences and what we call those kind of demand generators is that they do have a very, very strong ripple effect into the wider economy as well. So they are demand generators, I suppose. So they benefit the wider sector. There's also a huge amount of collaboration, particularly over the last number of years, between, I suppose, food and drink producers, food and drink experience providers, and others. So we have combinations of experiences where activity providers are coming together with food and drink providers, etc. So there's a whole lot of different ways that you can look at it, but I suppose essentially in some ways the story of that 1/3 of overall revenue is generated from food and drink, and the fact that food and drink are in the top 5 factors. It's absolutely fundamental to the tourism economy, but we could probably provide further context if that was useful in terms of bringing some of those types of examples to life.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Oh, that just sounds like a dog barking. Can I ask that Sinead be brought back into the spotlight again? Sinead, I realise you dropped out there, so I don't know if you had anything further you wanted to add.
No, thanks, Chair. No, I caught most of Gary's response there. Just before we talk about bringing tourists into South, I think we need to sort out our broadband. Listen, that's fine. I'm done, Chair. Thanks a million. Okay. And thanks to Rosemary and Gary as well.
Okay, thanks, Sinead. Okay, can we bring then in Kelly into spotlight? Yeah, there we go. There's Kelly with us.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, guys, thank you very much for your presentation, Gary and Rosemary. There's an item that I'd like to go back to that's within the legislation in regards to major events. Now, in this amendment and within the original legislation, it talks about where the department considers that an event which is to take place in Northern Ireland will attract significant public interest, and then it lists all of the things that can happen. Now, the department in question is communities as opposed to economy, and I'm just wondering, is there any rub there that you have experienced to date? I know obviously we don't have these licences, so I'm just wondering how that works for yourselves. Now, we think about the Open, there were so many vested interests in that. Is it easy enough, or is this another layer of bureaucracy? I'm just wondering how that fits with the different departments being involved with major events. Do you envisage that as being a problem that could delay licence issue? Now, I'm very aware that events take a long time to plan, so there shouldn't be, but have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, go on, Gary, sorry.
Go ahead, Rosemary.
No, I think what I was just going to say is I suppose, you know, it would be very important that there is clarity in terms of the framework and simplicity, I suppose, in relation to the process, because fundamentally in terms of the major events, you know, we all know the outcome that we're trying to achieve is that I suppose the Northern Ireland isn't seen as a sort of a less competitive or less easy place to do business for events organisers and the whole, as you mentioned, Kelly, the whole host of partners that have to come forward. So I think, you know, but without getting into the detail of it, I think clarity is very, very important, that I suppose those international investors or event organisers or whoever it may be would not see Northern Ireland as a more difficult place to do business or to do the transaction. So I think clarity and simplicity in the process should be the overall outcome. But, you know, I think we can have faith that we can do that together when we're working together. But I think if we focus on the outcomes of absolute clarity and a really sort of, I suppose, as you kind of pointed out, a fairly streamlined process, I think that if those two bits are together, I think all of the key partners can work together to deliver on that.
And can I just ask, in regards to the Open, I know that there was changes made to the legislation by the then Secretary of State. I'm just thinking, who will be the licensing issuer for a major event? Who is the licensing issuer at the moment? And is it communities or economy, or is it the police, or who is it just currently?
My understanding is that it's communities. I will need to. I may need to just double check that.
Yeah, no, it's just, no, that's fine. It's just I wanted to clear it in my head. The other one I wanted to ask you about is the major event order conditions, which is included. And this comes from experience, and you guys have all the experience in the world with this. We know that, for instance, if there's a major event that takes place in, say, the Odyssey, or you know, in fact, if there's two major sporting events, say there's a football match happening at Windsor Park and there's something out at Titanic Quarter, the flow of traffic coming through different areas is incredible. And if there's any breakdowns in the West Link, heaven help Belfast. But I'm just thinking, there's part of the event order conditions where it talks about in 48B5, a major event which authorises the sale of intoxicating liquor for consumption in place or premises also authorises during the first 60 minutes after the conclusion of the hours specified in the order the consumption of intoxicating liquor. And then it goes on to say that can be reduced down to 30 minutes. I know that other comments that we have had about extending hours means that it could help move people out, rather than a lump sum of people coming out at 1 o'clock in the morning, that it could actually help to, you know, break down how many people come out at the same time. I'm just thinking, as far as management of major events is concerned, would that have any impact, given that we know Belfast can become completely snarled up after events can happen, and what happened with the Open? You know, how, as long as there's a joined up public transport offer, that could certainly help. But we're talking about hours here that may well be very early hours of the morning when public transport may not necessarily be readily available. How do you think that's going to work for major events, and if there's anything missing in the legislation in relation to that?
Sorry, apologies. I don't know whether I went offline there for a good part of it. A huge amount of what Kelly had to say. I don't know if it went off for anybody else. But Gary, I don't know if you picked up on some of the content there.
I think that's really getting into, I suppose, the detail, Kelly, and it's right that we're going through all of that scrutiny at the moment. When we are looking at the bill, and you know, that is going to probably come down to that event sort of management plan, and in terms of what that looks like and how that translates, I suppose, to the logistics on the ground. And as you've rightly alluded to, Kelly and Rosemary and I have brought it up on a number of occasions today, it's all in and around that visitor experience. So we might be, I suppose, locals then that are going down to the Odyssey or to Custom House Square. You know, we're taking in the concert or the music venue, but we don't then obviously want to see that translated into a really poor experienced right at the end of the night because, you know, the local infrastructure doesn't support all of that footfall, or that the dots haven't been joined up. And I suppose broadly, Kelly, from our perspective today, is that, you know, regardless of you know, who I suppose holds the powers then to designate sort of special or major events, is that you know, Tourism NI at this particular point of the bill consultation is to say that, you know, we're very supportive of seeing improvements made to sort of that framework and how it lands, and, you know, we're willing for those further elements within the bill, if they are to be scrutinised further, if we do want a little bit more clarity in terms of, well, who actually, you know, I suppose dots the I's and crosses the T's with this one, is the Tourism and I would be very, very keen, I suppose, to be party to those discussions, in addition to our local authorities, the PSNI or traffic management or other stakeholders. So I appreciate that that's really in the detail, but I get it, Kelly. There's nothing worse than going as a spectator, enjoying the concert, and you actually can't get home, you know, because the infrastructure is there. And that in itself, I suppose, that it's like checking out of a hotel early and having a poor breakfast. You know, that's what you remember. We might not do it again because we didn't get home, where there were different challenges. And so I totally get that, and we would help support that in any way that we could as an organisation.
You're absolutely right, Gary. It's not part of this, but it's an unintended consequence that may come forward. But the drinking up time, or the finishing up, you know, your drinks at that end of night after concert or after a match has finished, or whatever way that would work, I'm just not wholly convinced that it's not just moving people leaving premises from 1:30 to 2:30. You know, it's just a up number. I don't know how gradual people will leave premises at that point, but hopefully it's just something that I have in the back of my mind, having known Belfast to get snarled up, and having been part of the transport discussions with the Open. You know, what if you added on another hour? Would it make it easier? I don't know as far as infrastructure is concerned, but I was just interested to hear what you're going to say. It can, of course, then be amended to bring it down from 60 minutes to 30 minutes, and then we can see how that works. But I think that this move forward for major events can be nothing but good for Northern Ireland. You know, it just gives us another option to have. And I welcome your comments on the microbreweries and the local breweries. It helps to set in place some of the comments that we have received already from witnesses, that it's not to negate what we already have, but just to add more that we can offer. Yeah, no, thank you very much. Both, that was really helpful today. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. And I suppose our next witness session up is the Institute of Licensing, and I know that Stephen and Owen are listening in here, so they might be able to answer some of those questions about responsibility when it comes to major events and permitted hours. So, look, thank you very much to Gary and Rosemary for your time here today and for your submission into the bill. It's been a very worthwhile witness session. Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just point out two quick points before we leave on the producer's licence? It's there within the written submission, but it was just really to tap on to the proposals for the producer licence in terms of encompassing all facilities associated with drink production. So under the bill proposals, I suppose it's just to have an awareness of those sites of production where the visitor servicing elements might take place, where retail might take place, and it's just to make sure that there's no ambiguity, I suppose, in how that's presented. We will have heard from others, particularly in ROI, where the producer's licence has been made available but has had really low uptake, and that may be a cost consideration, but also it might actually be, well, how do I interpret this legislation and how does it apply to me as a business owner? So I thought I would just touch on that again before we leave. And you will have heard from others in terms of the concerns or potential challenges in and around that collaborative product space, whereby if we had two breweries that maybe wanted to come together to create a product, or we might have a brewery with a local cidery that really want to bring certain special aspects or ingredients together to create a product, and how that would translate then into the producer's licence. So I think it's all really positive in terms of what's outlined there, but just to make sure, I suppose, that for small producers, when they are reading the legislation, that they're not completely overwhelmed, and they know that how it translates to them on the production premises and for collaboration.
No, look, thank you for that, Gary. That was one of the questions that the clerk had asked me to ask you and I didn't ask you. So I'm very glad that you really came in and cleared that up a little bit for us. I know whenever we've had various witness sessions where we have heard it said that in the Republic of Ireland, as you say, there's been very low uptake of this, and we actually don't know what that's reflective of. You know, is it because of the bureaucracy or is it because of cost? We don't actually know that, so that would be worthwhile actually us finding that out as well. So thanks for clearing that up too. Look, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Chair and Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, 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 bye.
Bye.
Okay, members, we're going to then move swiftly on to agenda item 8, which is the Institute of Licensing NI, who are again going to brief us on the Licensing and Registration of Clubs Amendment Bill. Can I inform members you'll find our agenda item at page 205 of your meeting pack. And then can I then welcome to the meeting Stephen McGowan and Owen Devlin. There we go, you're both with us, you're both very welcome. Can I then ask, I think it's yourself, Stephen, to begin the briefing, and you have up to 10 minutes. Thank you. Well, we can't hear you, Stephen. You just check that you're not on mute. Still can't hear Stephen. This happens occasionally, it's rather annoying. Do you want to try again, Stephen? No, it's not working. Look, what I am going to ask you to do, Stephen, because we've had this problem has happened many, many times in committee, can I ask you to go out and then come back in and rejoin the meeting, and I'll bring you in as soon as I see your name pop up here on my screen. Is that okay? All right, good stuff. Thanks, Stephen. Then we're going to put you in the hot seat on here, so I am now.
Thank you, Chair. Much appreciated. Maybe that signal from Scotland isn't working as well as it should be. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the committee for inviting us to attend today, representing the Institute of Licensing, as well as being a member of the Institute of Licensing here in Belfast. I'm also a solicitor, so I deal with the practical side of licensing applications in the courts here in the north, and I work closely with Stephen, who will be able to give an insight into the Scottish perspective and how some of the reforms we're considering here have been implemented and how they've worked in Scotland as well. I'm just going to touch on some of Stephen. I think is going to give you a bit of background to the Institute of Licensing and how it operates across the various jurisdictions. From my perspective, you'll obviously have read the written submission from the Institute of Licensing, and I don't want to go through each point in turn, because obviously I appreciate you'll have spent time going through it and you'll have read through. Just wanted to flag a couple of points from the Institute of Licensing perspective. The Institute of Licensing obviously welcomes amendments to modernising our legislation here, and views these reforms as very valuable and an opportunity to really develop the hospitality and the nighttime economy here, and also while protecting the community safety and public health. Some of the various points in our submission cover off some aspects of the bill. The Easter and additional hours is one such aspect. The Institute of Licensing is very supportive of that change. It's a change that is in force in England and Scotland in those jurisdictions, and the Institute of Licensing doesn't see difficulties in those jurisdictions with removing those Easter restrictions, and also the additional hours here will give flexibility, hopefully, to licensed premises here to grow that nighttime economy. The Institute of Licensing, in terms of those additional hours, would recommend the Department develops guidance on the new legislation and works closely with all those stakeholders, including the PSNI and the local councils. Again, one point we've flagged in our submission is around the alignment of the liquor and entertainment licences. We've sort of flagged on that we believe this change may just limit some of the flexibility which is in the current system. So a licensee who wishes to provide entertainment beyond the hours of their alcohol licence won't be able to do that now under the proposed bill. And that will fetter the discretion of our local councils, who, as you know, at present issued entertainment licences, whereas the courts deal with the liquor licences. This does go to a wider point, which we flagged in our submission, that the Institute of Licensing, while supporting these changes, will also support wider changes if there was an appetite going forward to look at maybe move into that council-based licensing system, whereas now, as a practitioner, I know we're dealing with a lot more court-based system at present. Support in terms of some of the other parts of the bill which we flagged in our submission. We are absolutely Institute of Licensing supports the provisions on special events, and I know Tourism and I have touched on that, so I won't go into it, and really support that. And then in terms of the local producers license, again, Institute of Licensing supports this, and I know you've heard from a number of stakeholders in that field in your various evidence sessions on that local producers license. Children and young people, again, Institute of Licensing is supportive of those clauses. I think it's clause 12. And what we would say in those clauses from an Institute of Licensing perspective is that we would seek for the private functions and other functions to be clearly defined in the legislation, so there's no ambiguity when it comes to enforcing this via the police and the local councils. One point we flagged in our submission in terms of clause 15 around vending machines was touched on earlier by the Wine and Spirit Trade Association in terms of how that could limit innovation in that sector. We've highlighted some examples. Some examples of how machines work in Pennsylvania. And we've also highlighted an example of a Nottingham-based scheme whereby technology is used. And one point we would flag with that clause is that while I can see where it's coming from in terms of a straightforward vending machine which anyone can use, what we don't want to do is limit innovation and limit sort of creative change as technology changes and as things change going forward. We just want to make sure that we don't tie ourselves to something in the bill which limits that going forward. Stephen is going to speak about Scotland and how clause 16, which is sort of replicated in Scotland, how that operates in practice, and the Institute of Licensing is supportive of those advertising changes. I know it was touched on earlier in terms of the Wine and Trade Association, in terms of the loyalty point scheme, and we would just ask why that's necessary if it does restrict consumer choice in terms of loyalty point schemes in supermarkets. That's all I had, Chair, just to cover off at the minute. I think Stephen is going to touch on a few more things there, if that's helpful.
Yep, well, look, thank you. We're having now an issue here with our system has failed. We've got an unstable connection here in the Assembly as well. So welcome to the world of the internet. So I don't even know if Stephen has rejoined the meeting, so I'm going to ask if he has rejoined, can he be brought into the spotlight? I won't even know if we are able to hear him or not unless he speaks. So if Stephen's there, can we bring him in? It is like a seance now. Is anybody because we can't see anything at the minute. Okay, I'm not hearing Stephen's voice coming through, so I'm not, which is a shame because I know that I was very interested to hear about his experiences, especially in Scotland. No, I don't think we've got sound from Stephen, and I don't know if he's rejoined the meeting even at this particular stage because I can't get back in at the minute. No, I have no access to the screen. And so we're going to have to just have I mean, if we can't get Stephen back in, we'll maybe try and fit him in at another date if we can't get him back in now. Just wanted to, if I can just ask you a couple of questions around, I know you said you support clause 16 as well. I read that in your submission about the advertising and promotions. We've heard conflicting evidence around that from various witness sessions that it could be restrictive for small businesses. Any comment or opinion on that?
Yeah, Chair, I've read through some of the previous evidence, and you can see how that could have an impact on some of those businesses. But I think if the advertising is kept to the licensed area, that will hopefully. I think Stephen is going to touch on some of these points as well in terms of how it works in Scotland, how it's worked quite well. But it's just about that balance in terms of ensuring the advertising, protecting young people and advertising, and also allowing companies to advertise their products.
Okay, thanks, Owen. I'm just looking, I've got my screens back up in front of me again, thankfully, and Stephen has not rejoined the meeting for some reason or other, whether he can't get back in. But I mean, if we don't get him in, as I say, before the end of your session here, we'll ask him to come back. So, well, there's not a problem with that at all.
He's back.
Is he back? He's not on my screen. Is he? Have you got? Can you text him or anything, Owen, and see if he's there? Or?
He's on my screen share, if that makes...
He's on your screen, he's just not on our screen. There we go. This is, technology is just wonderful. Stephen, we can't see you. I'm sorry, I don't even know if you can hear me. You can...
I can. Madam Woman, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. There you go. There you are. You've come up on our main screen, but not on the screen beside me. Please go ahead, Stephen. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I should say that I'm delighted to be able to speak to you. So it is an honour to be asked to come and speak to the committee today. And yes, the old Wi-Fi between Belfast and Glasgow that I've down at the start of the meeting, but hopefully all is well now. Madam Chairperson and members, my name's Stephen McGowan. I'm a specialist licensing solicitor from TLT. I spend my days representing the licensed trade, but today I'm here in my capacity as a trustee of the charity, the Institute of Licensing. I'm not sure what Owen may have said because of dropping off, so apologies if there's a slight amount of repetition. But I'm a director of the Scottish region of the Institute, and I'm here today to stand in for the chairman of the Northern Ireland region, James. James is the licensing manager for Belfast City Council. He couldn't be here today, so I'm standing in place. The IOL members are a registered charity whose role is to promote best practice within the licensing profession. And what I mean by that is to represent and support licensing profession. The IOL is a broad church. We represent local authorities, councils, police authorities and specialist licensing solicitors like myself and Owen all over the UK. It was many years ago. We have a regional presence across the UK, Northern Ireland, which again has been an established region for many years. We're delighted to give evidence to the committee today and engage with you on the licensing reform proposals. I think whilst I had dropped off, you've hopefully heard from Owen about what the Institute has had to say in terms of our written response. And perhaps my role today, members, is to provide you with some comparison in relation to Scottish alcohol licensing, especially given that the scheme has some notable crossover with your own current proposals. Having watched a number of the other evidential sessions as well as what's been discussed this morning, it seems to me that there's perhaps 4 key areas for me which may be of interest to you, which I've picked up on, and I'll briefly go through them in the case that I have, and of course happy to take any questions that members may have as well. The 4 areas that I picked up on just from reviewing the evidence sessions were the issues over loyalty cards, tap rooms, extended hours, and then also, if we have time, alcohol display regulations. So I thought I would tell you what happened in Scotland and what our experience is in relation to these things. If we pick tap rooms first, there was various discussion from your other person speaking this morning. I think it's fair to say that in Scotland over the last number of years there has been an absolute boom of small local craft breweries all over the length and breadth of Scotland, many of whom I represent and secure licences for, and they supply local beer to the pubs in the local area as well as to shops, and many of them do tap rooms. The presence of tap rooms in brewery premises in Scotland is a completely uncontroversial topic, which appears not to be the case in Northern Ireland, which perhaps to the licence moratorium, but from Scottish licensing perspective, my experience is that local publicans are supportive of local breweries wanting to provide or visit a facility like a tap room. because it creates added value to the wider attraction and amenity of a local area. I think the Scottish perspective is that very much a shared success, where you have attractions in a particular area, and those attractions are invested in and become more attractive. That is a shared success for multiple businesses and community in that area, and that's the experience that I think Scotland has to offer. You know, the Scottish breweries, I think we're up at something like 120 independent breweries in Scotland now, which is, you know, a fantastic number. They did absolutely thrive pre-COVID, but even post-lockdown, when unlicensed breweries were suddenly without a route to market, all of the pubs and restaurants closed down, a significant majority of Scottish local licensing boards, the authorities that issued, were very supportive in granting special temporary licences so that these breweries could sell direct to the public. Both breweries have survived lockdown 1 in the latter part of last year. As a result of those special licences, many of them have gone on to secure and apply for full licences. So it's probably all fair also to say that tap rooms are not for every small brewery. It's not for every brewery to offer some facility of that nature, a default permission in the Scottish experience, but it's something which more and more breweries are able to do and have been able to do, and the Scottish licensing authorities have supported, especially lockdown. I think it's accepted that of the wider, pardon the pun, tapestry to boost local tourism and experience communities and jobs in an area. Another point I wanted to make was that crossover and takeover brews are very popular and successful in the Scottish market as well. One of the members asked a question of the gentleman from the tourist body earlier on this point, and I think from a Scottish perspective it is something which is very popular. You see breweries joining up with one another to produce particular beers fairly regularly in Scotland. So that's a bit of an insight into tap rooms in Scotland, and I hope that's helpful. Loyalty cards was another hot topic that I discerned from earlier evidence. These schemes are lawful in Scotland because alcohol can be gained through points loyalty card systems where we employ the concept of cash equivalency. So, in other words, in order to get points in a loyalty scheme, you've had to buy other products, you've had to pay money in order to get those benefits. There was a bit of an interesting interplay with minimum pricing. I'm sure the members will be aware that minimum pricing has been in Scotland for a few years now. It's May 2018 when it was introduced, so there was a very interesting interplay between minimum pricing and loyalty card. Scottish Government's position, and indeed now the law, is that minimum pricing and loyalty cards can coexist, and where a loyalty card reduces the cost of an alcoholic item, which may reduce the value of that item below the minimum price, that's still considered to be off, because the loyalty points equate to a cash equivalent. So it's this cash equivalency which rules the day, as it were, when it comes to the use of loyalty cards. So this is something that we're well used to having in Scottish supermarkets and indeed other retailers across the country, and works quite well with the systems that we have, including the very famous or even infamous, depending on your view, condition of minimum pricing. The other topic which which could be of some interest to the committee was about later hours and extensions. Now, putting COVID in the lockdown period one side, I think it is fair to say that there has been absolutely a clear move to later hours culture over some years. People start their night out later, they therefore want to stay out late. In Scotland, is a phenomenon which has been observed and accepted by local Scottish licensing boards. I should say very briefly that Scottish licensing boards are not the council, they are an independent creature, albeit that it is local councillors that sit on the board, but they are independent from decisions by the local authority. And Scottish licensing boards have reacted to this well-observed phenomenon of this later hours culture. Many licensing boards have introduced pilot projects to allow premises to trade later. Perhaps the first and probably most famous of these was Fife, the Fife area, where premises in places like Kirkcaldy were allowed to trade until 4 AM. Now, when this proposition was put forward, Police Scotland, the single police authority in Scotland, they were, I think it's true to say, very concerned about the idea of later hours. They were very concerned about antisocial behaviour, about are we just putting grief back an extra hour or two at the end of the night, and they did oppose the pilot project. The licensing board decided to run with it and give it a suck it and see approach and run the thing for a year. Now, at the end of the year, these premises in Kirkcaldy and other parts of Dunfermline who'd been trading to 4 AM were all called back in, along with the police review. And the police evidence was that they had completely reversed the position. And in fact, the police said it was best that happened in relation to antisocial behaviour in that area, because antisocial behaviour had gone down significantly. And part of the reason for that was that people are more relaxed and leisurely out. People were not rushing to finish their drinks at an earlier cut-off time, not rushing to get taxis and causing resource issues and tax. And there was a more, because of the more staggered and later times, people would go home in fits and starts, and that created a real positive impact on social behaviour. So after the year Fife ended, the police actually supported it, and that is now the case in Fife that has moved forward on that basis a few years ago now. There's various other examples. For example, in Glasgow City, there was a 4 AM pilot introduced for nightclubs. Sadly, the clubs only wanted to take advantage of that for a few months before the lockdown kicked in. Not really seen properly the impact of that going. But I think about smaller Scottish towns where similar projects have been run, places like Dumfries, Dumbarton. All of these smaller and indeed in some cases rural areas have recognised the need for later hours and have instituted these projects where they have granted licences, permanent licences in some cases to later hours. And it seems to have gone well. There's always, of course, individual cases where perhaps there's antisocial behaviour and the licences can be brought back in and varied and reduced, where there is individual cases that occur of that nature. But I think it is fair to say that across Scotland there have been numerous local licensing boards who have granted later hours, and those projects have been successful, not just for the operator and for the customers who want to go out and stay out later, but for wider local communities and for the responsible authorities such as licensing staff and police. So that's a few insights into the Scottish licensing system numbers. I hope that was useful. But I'm at disposed if you have any particular questions for me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, thanks Stephen, and that certainly was very useful. I know that you were listening in earlier as well and would have maybe heard, and you have heard in previous evidence sessions about this loyalty card issue and how that is going to pose us a great problem. As you said there, we don't have minimum unit pricing here, and how the department are actually going to achieve what they want to achieve with the loyalty card issue is beyond me, because all I can see is it will cause great problems. So it will for many of our large retailers. Can I then take you back to the local producers issue? And you'll know you've listened to some of our evidence we've had here and the conflicting evidence that we're getting along those lines. But we do know that as part of our deliberations, we're going to have to really look at this very seriously, and we're going to have to look at the issue of tap rooms most definitely as well. Can I just ask you then, when it comes to the licensing in Scotland for local producers, what way does the licensing work for that? How much does a licence cost for that? Just a ballpark figure of what a local producer could be looking at to have that licence and to have a tap room?
Sure, happy to help with that. The licences for tap rooms in Scotland are essentially no different to the licences for any other type of on-sales premises. A pub, a bar, a restaurant, a nightclub. Every single on-sales licence in Scotland is referred to as a premises licence, and in fact the same system, although there are differences, the same system operates in England and Wales. So when you have a brewery that wants to sell alcohol on its premises, which is colloquially known as a tap room, the application process is identical to that to apply for a new pub or a new restaurant which may be opening. In terms of cost, the licensing fees payable to the local authority are based on a sliding scale and linked to rateable value. The absolute maximum that can be charged is £2,000. Off the top of my head, based on my own experience as a solicitor that represents breweries, I would say that an average figure for a brewery to apply for a licence for this facility would probably cost them somewhere between £1,500, because the rateable value for a small unit which makes industrial state that was clearly going to be a lot smaller than, say, a 5-star hotel.
Okay, look, thank you for that, Stephen. And you know, our licensing system here is very, very different. So it is. So it's just then, how would you see then that we proceed then with those licenses? I mean, £1,000 to £1,500 based on rateable value seems like a pretty fair enough price. But what way do you see that if we progress this? How do we ensure that there is a fair price across the board here as well? Because there's certainly not a fair price when it comes to our licences over here, whenever with the surrender principle and the cost that some people are having to pay for a licence here for pubs or restaurants. So just how do you think that we could progress that, or what would be a fair way of progressing it?
If we put the surrender principle and the sort of moratorium point one side, and if I look at the licensing regimes and how those are costed across other elements of the UK, England, Wales and Scotland, in the vast majority of cases, the fees are based on setting it to be cost neutral to the city. In other words, the fee applied for the licence is based on what it would charge what it would cost the authority to process the application. So, in other words, local authorities should not profit on the application, generally speaking, on a cost neutral basis. So that's a possibility, that if you were to introduce a special licence that was unaffected by the surrender principle, then you could look to set a fee based on what it would cost the licensing authority to process in time and try to work out a fee that way. Another example that you might use specifically for brewers, and I think this would only work for brewers, is a graded fee based on the amount of alcohol which is produced. You may have, I'm sure you'll have brewers of different sizes, and perhaps therefore the amount of litrage which is produced may be a relevant test as well. But ultimately, of course, members, it is a matter for you to decide how to proceed with this idea.
Yeah, no, look, thank you for that, Stephen. It's just, I mean, I do understand as well where our pubs are coming from as well, where they're saying they've had to pay extortionate amount of money for their licence. They've got extortionate overheads and everything else, and they want to see a fair system as well. So it's that balance. It's trying to balance that fair system for both, which I think will cause us in the department an issue on this going forward. I'm going to open up to members for some questions as well. The only person I have whose hand up is at present is Kelly. So can anybody else let me know if they want to come in, and can I bring in Kelly then, please?
And Stephen, very useful. I want to go back to your paper. It's on our own pack, page 211 for our members, where you talk about lower age limits at events. Can you just close that out a little bit more for us, where you say, for instance, there's an 18th birthday party, there could be an issue for the police to enforce that, and you mention about lower age limits.
Thank you. Owen, I think, on that answer, if I've not to give them too much of a surprise, as the Northern Irish representative, is probably more appropriate for him. And then, if necessary, I can, from a Scottish perspective, to get context.
Hi Kelly, yeah, I think the NI local government are going to be giving evidence to you on this point as well. Yeah, it's just it's whether there should be a lower age limit considering those events, particularly ones that say a private function which might go on to 1 AM. And it's just how you put those safeguards in place around all those factors.
Okay, so I'm just sort of thinking, it isn't in your mind, for instance, if it was an 18th birthday party where alcohol can legally be sold on the process, but it would be limited to 18-year-olds.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. Yeah.
Okay. And also just thinking about age as well, age verification for delivery. Have you any thoughts on how that could work, or the experience, Stephen, you have from Scotland?
If I go first on that one, in the Scottish system, the position with age verification is essentially no different to buying a pint in a pub or standing out in the market. If I order alcohol and it's not my person delivering the alcohol has to verify my age. If my teenage daughter, or for example, instead of me or my wife, then either they would have to come and get me or produce to show that they are 18 or over. The Scottish system would also require refusal of delivery where the person who is attempting to receive the goods is under the influence, in the same way that a drunk should not be served at a bar. The Scottish system are also significant record-keeping requirements, so that if you are delivering alcohol, for example, the breweries we've been speaking about, there's a huge amount of breweries who survive through home deliveries of product because they don't route to market. And what they have to do is to keep records, so there has to be a delivery book, a day book, the customer's details, the amount of alcohol that's been ordered. Record keeping of that nature is a part of the licensing conditions in Scotland.
Thank you. Just then, I have a couple more points here. The sporting events and sporting, places. You talked about having those events open throughout the year for younger people. Just to get your thoughts on that, because we know that there's a proposal that you could only hold it maybe once throughout the year. What's your thoughts on that? Does it make it more difficult to just limit it to one or a few times per year, or would you just rather see that it's the same rules for the summer as it is for the winter?
I think that's one for Austin.
Yeah, Kelly, yeah, that's what we're saying. So rather than limit it to the summer months, have it throughout the year. I think, Stephen, that's how it would work in Scotland across your jurisdiction. There's no limit this summer. There's no summer month limit in terms of the sporting clubs.
Okay, yeah. To be honest, to me that makes sense and makes it easier, but I'm not sure why there's this limit put in. There was another part in your paper where you talked about people drinking alcohol in vehicles. I'm going to actually say to the chair, I think we need to write to the Department of Infrastructure. A few years ago there was legislation brought forward about consumption of alcohol on vehicles, and I think that's already within legislation here.
Yeah, it's true, the points we've raised, and it's whether it comes under this legislation, Kelly, or a different piece of legislation, because there has been issues in terms of bus drivers not wanting to take responsibility for that. So it's just where that legislation would sit. But it's just a relevant point we wanted to flag in terms of that, because it is very prevalent across our communities here, as you probably know.
Party buses were a big concern back in my day when I was working in transport, but I know that there was prosecution of the driver if people were drinking on the bus or on the taxi. So it's something I think we need to match in with Department of Infrastructure on that one. But thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Mark Durkin, can I bring Mark in?
Thanks, Chair, and thank you guys for that. Kelly just got it in the end, but the issue I was going to come in on, and that was the transport. I think you guys have categorised the missed opportunity and it more to do with. But and remember when I was in the Department of Environment, this was an issue that caused headache and the officials, but heartache for many parents and transport providers out there. Now that it has been raised, I would certainly concur with Kelly that it's not something that we can ignore, and we have to see if there is an opportunity to get this all through this legislation. Obviously working with the Department for Infrastructure, and I believe DEF also has a role in this. So I think you might be giving us a wee bit more work to do as if we haven't enough. But I was just wondering, do you know of any examples of how other jurisdictions deal with this, or does it seem to be a particular issue here?
Certainly I can answer that for Scotland and indeed I think for England and Wales. The Scottish system and the English and Welsh systems do allow vehicles to be licensed, but you've got to remember that we are coupled with the surrender moratorium. So the grant of new licences is based on the merits of that application as any whether or not there's another licence that is subsisting or not. So in Scotland, for example, it's quite common the vehicles be licensed and they will hold a premises license. The same type of licence that applies to a pub applies to a vehicle instead. And the benefit of that to the system is that the person that wants to run that business is veiled to the police, is subject to a fit proper test, and the vehicle itself is also subject to safety checks to a certain extent. That then brings that type of activity into the regulatory system. And I think that's the key part, because when you've got those activities operating outside the system, how do you deal with them? Yeah. Whereas data licensing required for a vehicle, then those operators will have to apply. It means that the regulator can keep a check on them. The licence can be reviewed every so often. The licence can be revoked if the person is allowing underage drinking to happen, for example. And that brings it into the regulatory system, and I think that's the principal approach, certainly viewed in the other constituent parts of the UK.
Yeah, Mark, at present, our licensing categories under the Licensing Order 1986 doesn't include, you couldn't license a bus or a party bus, for instance, because it probably wasn't envisaged when that was drafted, and it's not a category of licence under that legislation.
Okay, thanks guys. I think it's something we might have to look at, or in collaboration with other committees and departments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Mark.
Yeah.
I've no other members who have indicated that they want to comment or ask anything at this stage, so can I thank you, Stephen and Owen, for coming along and briefing us today, and thank you for your submission as well and our call for evidence. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the...
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to the committee.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, members, we're going to then move on to agenda item number 9, which is a briefing from the Safeguarding Board, again on our Licensing and Registration of Clubs Amendment Bill. Members, there's no papers for this agenda, it will just be an oral briefing. So can I welcome to the meeting Bernie McNally and Andrew Thompson. These are both very welcome. Can I ask then, Bernie, I think it's yourself that is going to provide us with an oral brief. And you've up to 10 minutes, Bernie, so if you want to go ahead.
Okay, good morning everyone. I think it's still morning, so good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Can indeed, yes.
Yes, okay. Good morning. My name's Bernie McNally and I'm the chair of the Safeguarding Board for Northern Ireland. And I think our presentation here, this 10-minute presentation, will be in 2 parts. I will make some comments on the context of the Safeguarding Board and the issues around the licensing laws in relation to that, and then Andy will make more specific comments on some of the changes that are being proposed. Well, the Safeguarding Board, as most of you will know, is a membership organisation. It's made up of 27 members, and those members include the police, social services, education, probation service, youth justice agency, and we have members of the voluntary and community sector on our board. So it's a membership partnership, really, that its main function is to safeguard and promote the welfare of children in Northern Ireland by coordinating the work of the various organisations that are members and ensuring the effectiveness of each of the organisations. So we really try to make sure that the various organisations don't work in their own silos, that they work collaboratively and collectively on matters of safeguarding. So we're not a regulator, but because the regulators are all associated with the various organisations like the Policing Board or QIA or whatever. We're more an enabler to enable these organisations to work effectively. And the Safeguarding Board has 3 key priorities going forward in their latest strategic plan. We have the mental health and well-being of young children and young people is one of our key priorities, domestic violence and neglect of children. And as you can imagine, alcohol is a factor in all 3 of these key issues. And I suppose generally we would say anything that increases accessibility to alcohol to either the parents or the children will have an impact on those 3 issues. And the Safeguarding Board are very acutely aware that all of the members are acutely aware of the dangers of alcohol misuse among children and their parents. And there's no good news story in relation to that. We have issues relating to domestic violence, risky behaviour by children, suicide, health issues, public order issues. So all of those issues we are dealing on a day-to-day basis with the fallout from that. However, on the positive side of this, the research would indicate that some positive trends in relation to alcohol consumption by children and young people, and the trends are all downwards, that children are drinking less, that they're drinking less frequently, and when they do drink, they're drinking less binge-like behaviour, although they still binge, but that these trends are all on the downward trend, so we're quite positive about that. And there's been a 40% increase in the number of children who describe themselves as teetotal. So that's really, those are really positive things. I suppose in relation to the legislation that you're proposing today, it's all about building in safeguards. And I'm going to hand over now to Andy Thompson, who's the chair of one of our committees, to give us some more specific detail on that.
Okay, thank you, Bernie.
Thank you, Bernie, and thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed, Andrew.
Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you. I'd just like to, first of all, thank the committee for having us before you today. And I'd like to look at some of the specific proposed changes that especially affect the laws around children on licensed premises and the accessibility to alcohol. They are attendance of children at underage functions after 9 p.m, children remaining at family functions after 9 p.m, and sporting clubs extending the time children can remain, especially during summer months. The board is ever mindful that any extension to the time children may stay on licensed premises could influence their relationship with alcohol, but the board does also consider the positive impact varied social and cultural experiences can have on a child. If the functions highlighted in the proposed amendments are appropriately considered and approved with regulated restrictions enforced to ensure the safeguarding of those children in attendance, then the board feels that there are benefits to children in developing their social interactions in an environment that is safeguarding aware, with identified individuals trained and experienced in child protection. Most clubs and event locations will now have a child protection officer trained and vigilant in safeguarding children. Functions closed to outsiders with regulated oversight could be beneficial locations for children to socialise, as opposed to the unseen, unregulated alternative. Family functions with the proper controls would allow children to be more fully involved in the major family occasions and celebrations, which are highlights in the family calendar. Sporting clubs provide a refuge of fitness, exercise, teamwork and companionship. Often in summer months, games like golf, football and GAA will not end until after 9 p.m, and the opportunity for under 18s to engage for a short time to conclude their event and the day should be seen, again if properly regulated in the complete sense of the word, as opportunities for children to develop physically and emotionally. Premises like those mentioned in the proposed changes to the regulations are those with experience in the presence of children, with appropriate limitations, and are generally seen as safe places. Organisations like Sports NI have worked tirelessly to enhance child protection awareness and training. Safeguarding policies are commonplace and social experiences are valuable lessons for children. Well-managed and regulated events can be used to reduce the draw of unseen, unregulated actions some children are attracted towards. In relation to some of these other specific items, self-service vending machines in locations or premises where children could have access to alcohol are not facilities the SPNI could support. Formal approval and oversight by the Department of Health of regulated codes of practice, of which a breach could have licensing consequences, are a positive approach. Self-regulated codes of practice lose some element of public confidence over those seen as formal, where non-compliance has possible consequences. That, in the first stage, would hopefully encourage compliance, but if not, they at least allow for action to be taken to remove those who increase risk from the marketplace. On the particular point of the amendment re-advertising, the SPNI see this as a good reminder as to the rules regarding clubs and admission, and that's in regards to the specific advertising of events. On a more general point in relation to advertising, advertising alcohol in a child-friendly environment is questionable on behalf of the SPNI. Research tends to show advertising increases awareness and cultural acceptance. The view of the SPNI is that less advertising of alcohol is generally a better thing in the world of children. It is accepted that a considerable level of financial support and funding is created from this activity, and many organisations benefit from the income. But if we remember that they said snooker would collapse after the embassy was removed from the World Championship, and Formula One would go under if Marlborough's involvement and support was excluded. This is not just a child safeguarding debate in relation to advertising, and many others will have a significant view and different approach. The view of the SPNI is that the link between things that are good and wholesome like sport should not have the obvious and calculated attachment of alcohol. With the awareness that advertising is a key element and driver of demand and has a significant cultural influence, our view is directed purely at the possible influence on children openly advertising alcohol could have, especially with the absence of any controls over content, location, or limitation on audience access. SPNI's general position to the committee this morning is that we are not pro-alcohol and we're not anti-hospitality. Society should be open to change in a managed and safe fashion. The SPNI has a safeguarding stance. Children need safeguarding, well-being and protection. If we can provide well-being in line with safeguarding, then that should be our goal. With the correct positive measures, improving the social lives of children would be both physically and emotionally beneficial. Family life and safely derived peer events in children's lives are good for mental and general well-being. Social experiences and development are good for children. The importance is the balance between facilitation of these experiences and ensuring built-in legislative protective measures which ensure adult oversight and adherence to a safe environment. The question is, do we think the proposed amendments achieve this? I think given the move to replicate the current positive examples in places like sporting clubs is a good place to start. Some of the things we like are the codes of practice, identified individuals responsible for safe practice, exclusion of alcohol when not directly supervised by parents, and building on good practice and evidence of responsible control in clubs. We all see those as encouraged supportive changes to control the environment that the amendments would bring about. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, Andrew, thank you for that, and thank you, Bernie. I just wanted to touch on a couple of points that you'd made there, and I think I absolutely agree with you 100%. Our sporting clubs have some of the absolute best child protection policies in place, and we know that has had to happen because of various historical events, but they're absolutely, I know anybody who's ever been involved with any of those sporting clubs directly or indirectly knows that the hoops that they have to jump through through social services and the police in order for those children to be protected the best that they very can. So I agree when you said that, Andrew, that should be replicated across. So whenever we're looking now at then the likes of hotels or bars or wherever else where there's functions taking place, whether that's a wedding or whether that's an underage formal, whatever that might be, what checks are there put in place right now on those premises when it comes to child protection and safeguarding, you know, some very vulnerable young adults as well that would be attending those events? Are there checks in place already? Do the hotels and bars that hold these events have to go through the same rigorous checks as our sporting clubs when it comes to social services and the PSNI?
Perhaps could I mention or discuss that with you? Well, the SB and I have been doing a lot of work over the last 3 or 4 years with what we call the nighttime economy in relation to child protection matters, and to increase awareness among hotels, taxi drivers, pubs and clubs about the dangers of the nighttime economy for some young people, and particularly in relation to child sexual exploitation, and to make people aware of the dangers in relation to children, particularly where there's alcohol involved. So we are doing a lot of work. They don't have the same regulation as a sports club or a private members club would have in relation to, because they come under the auspices of, say, for example, Sport NI and their own sporting bodies who have all signed up to child protection regulation and child protection procedures, and many sporting areas don't get any grants, for example, if they don't have a designated child protection officer. I suppose in relation to the hotels having functions, say a school formal, well, our understanding is that will be a non-alcohol issue, and it's about making sure that venue is not linked with a bar and that there are not people drinking in that. A family event, we consider the best protectors of children are their parents or their significant family members. So we have an expectation that when children are in a wedding or in a granny's birthday party or whatever the event is, that the supervision of those children, those young people, are the responsibility still of their parents. And I suppose that's why we make a differentiation between a child going into a pub where they're not supervised by a parent and a child going into a pub where they are supervised by a parent in a controlled environment, and that these are private members' functions, so that other members of the public are not allowed into those venues when the children are there. So I hope that answers your question, but we don't have any. The hotels, while they might have codes of conduct and they may join with the SBNI and attend some of our courses on child protection awareness, I'm not aware that they have any regulation in that regard.
Okay. Is it something that we need to look at then, Bernie, going forward? I mean, with the best will in the world, I mean, the children and young people and teenagers especially, I've had 2 of them, you can't have them under your gaze 24/7 if you're attending something, an event with them. And there are people out there that groom, there are people out there that very much know how to attract those young people away from their parents and whatever else. They do it very well. And they work within all of our industries. They're not just, they work within all industries. So is there something we need to look at to have some more formal clause around that whole sort of that child exploitation and child protection? If these other events or these other spaces want to hold events for young people to be included in those events, do they need to then comply in the way, for example, our sporting clubs comply? Is there something we need to do around that?
Well, all of these venues and everyone has to abide by the law of the land, and they have to abide by the law in relation to the care and protection of children and young people. I suppose it's trying to get that balance in relation to where the children go for their socialising, and we feel that they should be under the watchful gaze of a responsible parent as much as possible. And if we don't provide those venues for those children, or if we say they have to go home at 9 o'clock from those venues, we know from our experience that those children will go somewhere else. So they'll go somewhere that's unseen. They'll go to parks or party houses or whatever. So having them where you can see them is probably the number one way of protecting them. So keep plenty of eyes on them. We also know that we've been doing some work, having done that work with the nighttime economy. For example, in taxi driving, for example, we have been trying to make sure that taxi drivers have a basic child protection awareness, so that they're not dropping children off at dodgy houses or people's houses that are, they're not having children in the back of their taxi with an adult that is suspect or whatever. So we're trying to work with the taxi companies, and we work with the Department of Infrastructure on that, and we have some regulation around that now, that in order to get their taxi licence they have to have undergone child protection training and child protection awareness, and they'll have to do that on a regular basis. So we are working with that. Whether you can have a regulation that regulates the entire hospitality outside what we already have in terms of the law and the public order stuff that the police deal with, I'm not 100% sure what that would look like. But I'm happy to discuss it with whoever needs to develop that type of regulation.
Yeah, I suppose, Bernie, I've just put on my social work head again from my previous career before I became an MLA, and been looking at this and thinking, how do we make this more secure to protect children? Because that's what we need to be doing. But I'll move on then. I just want to then just touch on quickly on the advertising side of it. And again, as I said, our sports clubs are fantastic models of how that whole child protection policy can be done well. But then we know that they walk straight onto a football pitch or whatever type of pitch, and there you'll see hoardings all around it, advertising alcohol. In many of our local towns here, what's your views on that?
I'll hand over to Andy in a moment, but I suppose my general view is that in order to, I mentioned that there was a reduction in a number of children who are drinking and the frequency of drinking and the extent that they're drinking, and I think a lot of that comes down to a change in culture, that we've tried to change away from that culture that drinking is the only place that you can socialise and where young people can feel happy, and also we've got away from that idea that alcohol is so bad that children actually want to drink it, right? So we're trying to get that balance in the culture. But we think that anything that promotes alcohol as a positive thing is not good, because it is not positive for children, and it's not positive for their families. It's not positive for, we see it every single day in relation to domestic violence and in relation to poor health outcomes for children and their parents, in terms of children taking risky behaviour. So there's nothing positive about alcohol, but what we think is that to reduce down as much the advertising as we can, because if you take something like, I don't want to pick out any particular sport, but if you take something like Guinness or Harp or some of these Irish alcohol brands, and you say, well, they're sponsoring one of the biggest GAA events in the country, or one of the biggest rugby events in the country, or one of the biggest soccer events in the country, children will see that as a positive reinforcement of what alcohol is. And I think we need to try to reduce that and change that that cultural our love affair with alcohol here in Ireland has to change. And I think it is changing, but it's slow, and I think advertising is a key element of that. Maybe Andy wants to make a comment on that more specifically.
Bernie, I think you've answered it very well. Just probably reiterate the complications, and the Safeguarding Board is very aware that this is a much broader debate than just in relation to safeguarding. But our view is that Bernie has expressed, but very complicated issue in regards to just given one of the elements that Bernie had mentioned, the Guinness, say, and the rugby, how do you prevent that from, matches in Dublin will be screened live on television here. Children who, teenagers, both boys and girls who play rugby, will be watching that avidly. So I think the general idea is limit as much as possible the access children would have to alcohol advertising, but accept the fact that it's a very, very complicated issue, and one that will take a massive debate, and it'll have to probably be done on a national basis.
Okay, Andrew, thank you. And I know we're going to be looking at the whole gambling legislation coming up, not in another bill, and we'll be looking around the advertising of gambling as well, whether that's on football grounds and church. So it's part of a bigger issue of how it's blatant in your face advertising constantly when you watch any of these sports. And as you said earlier, Andrew, like when snooker did take away, when Embassy started advertising on the snooker and Marlborough on the racing, these things continued without any hassle and without any problem, and we're still able to continue to this day without that major sponsorship blazoned across everything that we saw on our screens. So I think it is something that we probably will have to look at closely going forward, both in this bill and the gambling bill. Thank you. That's all from me at the moment. I only have Kelly, who has said that she wants to ask a question. So Kelly.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Bernie and Andrew. Andrew, I think that we maybe sat on a committee together at some stage away at the time that Access NI was maybe being developed across community and voluntary sector. Now, that's a while ago. Thank you very much. To be honest, the Chair has asked quite a few of my questions, but there's something that has come up with previous witness evidence sessions that I would like to pick your brains on to see how we can work with this. Age verification. Now, if a young person is learning to drive, or they happen to have a passport, or whatever it may be, they may have appropriate documentation. But I'm just wondering, as we heard before with the licensing guys there, so if you have an 18th birthday party and say that that person's at upper sixth in school or at work or whatever, and they've invited their friends to it. There was a consideration made that a lower age limit should be attached to those types of parties. But how do we get age verification from children? You know, if it was a lower age, say 16 or 15 or whatever it may be.
Well, it's very difficult because I remember when I was a student, and that wasn't yesterday, and going to America, and America had a 21 age group, age limit for children, and of course we were all under 21 because we were all students. I don't know any student, not that I'm admitting this, but I don't know any student that didn't go with some false ID to America to get into bars and clubs because they knew that there was a 21 age limit. And with modern technology, they can fake those IDs easily. The pictures, the laminated covers, whatever. And it's very, very difficult. And a lot of bars and off license and all are now saying 21, because at least if they get it, that gives them a bit of margin for error. So if they say you can't come into our premises unless you're over 21, or you can't get alcohol sold at an off license unless you're 21, I think that gives them that. But what's the age difference between a 17 and 3/4 and an 18 in one day? There's not much difference, and I think it's almost impossible for the bar staff, to, I know that I'm involved in some clubs, we don't have any underage, have those 18 birthday parties because they're really hard to police and really hard to manage.
Glad to hear you saying that, because I have an 18th birthday party coming up now, and half of me sort of hoping that lockdown's still in place when that happens. But one of the other witnesses had given us a bit of concern about the legislation. Well, give me a bit of concern about the legislation when it talked about 16 and 17-year-olds not being allowed to take delivery of alcohol if they happen to work in a bar or a restaurant when there happens to be a delivery for their employer. That makes a difference for those people who are still in bracket of being a child, but prevents them from taking part in part of their job. Now, we do know that under health and safety there are protections for under 18-year-old employees, but I was just wondering what you thought about that issue.
Well, actually, this came up at our, not this particular issue, but the issue of work permits and child employment permits came up at our safeguarding board meeting yesterday. And actually, the Education Authority have a role here in terms of monitoring those employment permits for young people, and we are seeing an increase in the number of young people. We were looking recently at the young people who are engaged in the industry, the film industry now that's growing here in Northern Ireland. For example, child actors or additionals or whatever they're called that go along to these events, and how they're managed and how they chaperoned, because there's very grave dangers for young people among those adults. We know from the whole Me Too movement in relation to, young people trying to have a career in that industry. So we're acutely aware of young people in adult environments. It's hard to know. I just couldn't get my head around this when I was thinking about this particular issue. I just couldn't get my head around a young person who works in a pub. So they're in the pub all the time. What the difference is between them serving pints behind the bar or collecting glasses or whatever they're doing, or serving drink to the punters, and working in the storehouse and taking in a keg of beer from the wholesaler. I just couldn't get my head around that. So I think there is something around looking at the work permit generally for young people working in these types of industries, that there is there's a different danger. And one of our members yesterday raised, if you're going to increase the accessibility in terms of, say, over the holiday period at Easter, that's going to be more kids working longer hours. So that needs to be controlled to make sure, because that's when we all worked as teenagers. We worked at our summer holidays and our Easter holidays. So I think we have to be mindful of any change has another impact, unintentional consequence, if you like. And that we need, those child employment work permits, certainly after the meeting yesterday, I thought I'm going to need to have a meeting with the Education Authority and talk to them a little bit more about this and find out what are their issues and how they're dealing with these matters.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know that I'm from a rural area, and the only places that 16 and 17-year-olds can get work locally is either in the local bar or a local corner shop or garage, and that's it. So it is, as we know, throughout COVID, that has been the vast amount of students that have lost jobs or been furloughed have been in the hospitality industry. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about is child protection issues. So if you have a child who appears at a pub, I've just given this example, but it could apply anywhere in Northern Ireland, a child who appears at a pub, and rightly so, they are a child, they're not supposed to be there, they're not supposed to be trying to get in, and whoever on the door turns them away. But they're trying to get into the pub at a time that is much later because of the additional operating hours. As far as child protection issues are concerned, if that person has been trained and they recognise that there's a child protection issue, it could well be that this child is being urged by another adult or whatever. The out-of-hour reporting mechanisms, does this legislation and the additional hours cause any difficulties for reporting? Is it just go to the police? Or, because I know whenever my previous work in community and voluntary sector, it was very difficult to get trust people outside of working hours. So I'm just wondering, is there anything that we need to think about? Now, it may well be that this would be part of a code of practice, but is there anything there in joined up working between organisations that we need to be cognisant of for those pubs, bars, restaurants, hotels, whatever it may be, if there is a child protection issue, and reporting that?
Okay. Again, we worked with the nighttime economy and the clubs and pubs and the Sport NI's regulation around sporting organisations in terms of getting advice on. There's one thing about getting advice, what should I do? So they have designated officers and stuff, and what should I do? They don't want to be a hammer to cracking eggs. They don't want to be dialing 999 for the police for some wee lad trying to get into just go home, son, and behave yourself. So you're trying to balance that. But if you have a serious child protection concern, all of these organisations are really aware. We have at least three mechanisms. One is the police, obviously, or the first port of call after hours if there's an emergency. And we also have a 24-hour social work service that has been around for probably about 10 years now. We've had this emergency social work service. So if you didn't have the number for that, it's obviously online or whatever. But if you weren't able to contact them, the police will contact those people for you. And the third area is obviously the NSPCC Childline, which is manned 24 hours a day as well. So if there's an issue that people can't get, the police can't get social services in, there's the third option is NSPCC. So I think all those bases are covered. But I think the issue that I would be saying is if those staff are trained well, so if you have a person on the door, I'm not sure whether it's politically correct to call them bouncers anymore, or whatever the person on the door is, if they are properly trained to deal with these young people in a sensitive way, and maybe get them a taxi, or maybe say, I'll call your mum, give us your number and I'll call your mum and she'll come for you. If they can deal with these things in a de-escalation way, I think that's much preferable than the bigger, the force of the state coming in to look at this.
And can I just, my final question, thank you, is where a premises, because I know, and I think we probably all could put our hands on our hearts and say there are bars in different places across every part of the countryside where rightly there's underage drinking taking place. The police know it, the man in the street knows it. If there is a premises that is persistently flouting that, may even have been prosecuted for doing it, do you think that is an issue that should be considered at their licence renewal?
Oh, absolutely. The licence is there to regulate and protect the community. And I absolutely believe that if an organisation is deliberately flouting those rules, for all the reasons I've said in relation to young people and the dangers of alcohol with young people, and if recorders of us are working to try and reduce alcohol with young people, trying to protect children from alcohol, and a regulated establishment is deliberately flouting those laws, I don't think their licence should be continued. I think that absolutely. So
we can keep that within that, and if there is a code of practice coming through that has been talked about by different witnesses, that should be definitely as well as the licence. Thank you very much, folks. All that we can do to protect young people in this day and age. I know that when I think probably when I was younger, and my daughter now that she's of that 17-year-old age, you put like a makeup on and you cannot tell the difference what age they are. So it makes it extraordinarily difficult for the people who have the licences. And then you've got young people who are doing all that they can with their fake IDs and stuff to go past the licence rules. But thank you very much for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks Kelly, and no other member has indicated they want to ask anything, so can I also then just finish by saying thank you again to Bernie and to Andrew for joining us today. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, members, we're going to move on to agenda item 10, which is an SL1, and it's the Private Tenancies Coronavirus Modifications Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find the papers for this at page 220 of your meeting pack. This is to extend the emergency period beyond the 30th of September to the 31st of March 2021. This proposed rule further extends this emergency period beyond the 31st of March 2021 to the 30th of September 2021. Are members content with the department to proceed to make this rule? Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
Sure, can I just declare interest private sector landlord, please?
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you for that. Members content that the department proceed to make this rule? Yeah?
Yeah.
Great, good stuff, okay. Then can you turn to agenda item 11, which is SR 2021/28, the Loans for Mortgage Interest Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find a copy of this SR at page 224. Again, can I ask if members any objection to the rule? No objection to the rule. Then can I put the question that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021/28, the Loans for Mortgage Interest Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and subject to the Examiner's Statutory Rules report, has no objection to the rule. Okay, members, can we move then on to agenda item 12, which is SR 2021/31. Sorry, somebody want to say something?
Chair, sorry, I was hoping to come in if you don't mind. I was going to say, actually, do you see that piece of work? I know it's coming through from the department, but especially on the part to do with domestic violence, that's a very good news story that we actually have that protections has been corrected and is included. I don't know if that's something that maybe, Chair, you want to put out a press release on, just to say that that protection is in place.
Yep, okay. Look, thank you for that, Kelly. We'll get the committee clerk to look at that, so we will. That's okay. Okay. Agenda item 12 then, members, SR 2021/31, the Local Government Capital Finance and Accounting Coronavirus Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. Members, you have a copy of this SR at page 233. Again, can I ask if any members any objection to this rule? No objections? Okay, I'll put the question then that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021/31, the Local Government Capital Finance and Accounting Coronavirus Amendment Regulations. Hold on, I'm on the wrong page. Bear with me, sorry. I'm going to go back and read that again just so it's read into the record. That the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021/31, the Local Government Capital Finance and Accounting Coronavirus Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and subject to the Examiner's Statutory Rules report, has no objection to the rules. Okay, I'll move on then to agenda item 13, which is correspondence. Members, you'll find the memo at page 240 of your meeting pack. Can I draw your attention just to one item, and that's at page 316, and it's in relation to the review of Charity Commission. This email is from an individual who has been in regular contact with the committee, who has concerns about the review and the lack of involvement of the department. The individual also expresses concern that the final report will only be made available to the department on request. So can I ask members, are they content that we forward a copy of this email to the department for response? Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Other than that, I've nothing else to highlight under correspondence. Any other members? Kelly, see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say that I met with what are they called? The Independent Scientific Advisory Group. It's on page 323. And I spoke not as Deputy Chair of the committee, but just as a working MLA. But I think that I would like to draw it to attention of the committee. I think that the proposals that have been put forward by the group are extremely interesting. It's a way, or what they're proposing is a method by which we encourage people who cannot work from home to self-isolate by providing support. Scotland already has this in place, and I know we have the discretionary support, but discretionary support, it's not working I don't think it's working as well as it could be. In sending this forward to the department, I would like to ask the department what is their response to this proposal and what is their considerations in the welfare mitigations going forward, particularly for this one. I know welfare mitigations is a more general thing, but this is a COVID mitigation, and if something like that might be able to be affordable and accepted.
Okay, I know the memo we were forwarding this letter through to the department to ask them to make comment on it. Kelly, do you want to take it further than that then? Do you want to ask something specific? Yeah,
it's just to ask if this is, are they okay? We're asking them, are they going to take it forward? But it's their response to it, and their thinkings on this self-isolation grant proposal that includes, as Andy has talked about earlier today, increasing the maximum income floor, and so on, because that will have an input into welfare mitigations.
Okay, all right, we'll do that. Members agreed? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair. Just coming in on that, and this has to be done as a distinct piece of work as opposed to the review and the discretionary support that we're not going to hear back from until June.
Yeah.
Because it's just to do with the pandemic. This is about protecting people's health as well as their incomes, and not even just those individuals, but those around them as well. And I know I'd actually raised it with the Finance Minister, among others, previously. I'm not a scientist or epidemiologist, but it would be hard to conclude that the fact that we haven't had a satisfactory sufficient self-isolation hasn't contributed in some way to the spread or transmission of the virus.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that, Mark. Any other members, anything they want to highlight through correspondence?
Chair.
Yep, go ahead, Sinead.
Yeah. Just on that, I think the DFC have already done what they have agreed to do through the discretionary support payment, and I think in other areas, the COVID isolation grant, it actually sits with the Department for Health, and maybe that's something that Health should be looking at as well.
Okay. Yep. Thank you for bringing that point in as well. I suppose if we can get that letter off this week then about this, to do with this letter that we've received, get it off to our department and see what they answer back. And if it is something we need to then take to another department, we'll do that. Yeah. Are the members okay with all of that then? Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on then to agenda item 14, which is our forward work programme. Members, at the meeting of the 25th of February, hold on. That's wrong, isn't it?
No, it's next week.
No, it's not.
Next week's 25th, yeah.
Next week.
Next week is the 25th, Mike. I think today was the 25th. I'm way ahead of myself, so yeah. So no, it's not wrong. Apologies.
Make me think I'm going mad.
Members, at the meeting next week, the 25th of February 2021, we were briefed by the following organisations, again on the licensing and registration of Clubs Amendment Bill. We'll have NILGA in, we'll have the PSNI in, we'll have NI Alcohol and Drug Alliance, and then we'll also have Stirling University.
Sorry, Chair, I'm not picking you up at all there. There's a lot of background noise at the meeting.
Okay, I will try again, so if people can stay still for me, do I read it out? Next week we're going to have in NILGA, the PSNI, Northern Ireland Alcohol and Drug Alliance, and also Stirling University. So we'll have 4 briefings next week on the licensing bill. So we have. So members, any comments on that or content to note?
Chair.
Sorry, Sinead, did you want to say something?
Yes, yeah, Chair. Listen, that sounds, next week's evidence session sounds good. I just have a concern, and I don't know if any other members are picking up on this over the last few weeks. I feel there's been a real duplication in terms of the type of evidence that we're getting, and I think a lot of the questions, I think we're probably struggling to find new ways and new questions to ask the different organisations that are coming to give us evidence. And I completely appreciate the fact that we have to be thorough in our scrutiny role here, but I think the sector will be looking to us now as discussions are underway about the sector opening up again. And I think we should endeavour as much as possible to try and align with that. Whether that's in terms of getting more written submissions, but I certainly would like to have a clear understanding of when we will actually be getting to that clause by clause scrutiny that everybody's waiting on us to get to. So I just want to put that on, out there. I just feel like some of the evidence sessions are not that they're unnecessary, but they're a bit samey and they're being duplicated in terms of the evidence that we're getting and our ability to sort of ask different questions and new questions of those organisations. So I just wanted to put that out there, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Sinead. I don't know if you were at last week's meeting or you heard me say it in last week's meeting. We start our deliberations in March. We've only 2 more weeks before deliberations start. I set that out in the plan last week, so you'll be very glad to hear there's only 2 more weeks left of evidence gathering. And I suppose we wanted to have as broad a range as possible of people that come in, and we did say that we weren't going to be rushed in this, albeit we did have a time scale, and we're well within our time scale. So we are. So that is why we have continued to invite people in. And you're probably right. I mean, we've heard from many, it has been duplicated, whether that's been breweries or distillers or whatever else. We've heard over and over again some of the issues. But it is important that those people get to have their voice heard in this committee. Absolutely, it's vital. But as I said, it was all in our plan last week, the plan ahead for the bill. So we've only another 2 weeks of evidence gathering. Then we have 2 weeks of possibly 3 weeks of deliberations. So we do. So that's where we are within the plan. So we will meet our May deadline. We have no difficulty in meeting our May deadline. I wouldn't imagine there'd be an issue, and that's what that was our extension that we asked for. So we'll not go beyond that. That's okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Robin, did you have something on next week's or on this, or is it AOB?
Yeah, it's AOB, Chair.
Okay, well then I'll just
I think it's AOB.
I'll move on then to agenda item 15, which is any
Chair.
other business. Robin, did you have AOB?
I was really just, Chair, in line with what you'd said, at what stage do the bill team come in to give us the briefing, I think?
Okay, hold on, let Sean, you or Janice, what did you say there, 4 weeks? 4th of March. Once we start deliberations, yes, it was in the committee pack last week, that not only will we have the department in, but also the bill team will be here as well, alongside them. So that'll be on the 4th of March, they'll be here with us.
11th.
Or 11th, is it?
11th, the last evidence sessions are on the 4th.
The last evidence session, sorry, it's the 4th, it's the 11th.
But we have been meeting behind the scenes and flagging up a lot of the issues that are coming up along the way with, and they're obviously the department are listening into all of this and have been liaising with me, and we've been sending, key points and things to them. So there's a lot of work going on.
There's an awful lot of work going on in the background at the moment between certainly the clerks and the bill team and the department, because we didn't want to end up getting to the end of this and it all be all nasty shocks for everybody. Everybody is listening to what we're doing that is involved in this, so they're fully aware of every issue that is being highlighted. Excellent. Okay, sorry, was there someone else wanted to bring in any other business?
Chair,
yes,
if I could just on the forward work plan, and apologies if I have missed it, but I haven't seen in the pack, just because I'm new to the committee, I haven't seen no written in terms of time frame. So maybe if the clerk could send that on to me, because just like Sinead, I wasn't aware. I know we mentioned it last week, but if that could be sent on.
Yep, that's not a problem. I know in this committee we don't do a written forward work programme. I know in other committees I've sat on, I've seen them, but just with this, it hasn't been something that we have done. But I definitely will get that out to you. We'll get the full forward work plan for sort of the next 6 weeks when it comes to the bill. So it's sent out to everyone. Okay, members, any other business you want to bring up? No? Happy days, good stuff. Then I'll move on to agenda item 16, which is date, time and location for our next meeting. We'll meet next week here in room 29, that's the 25th of February at 9:15 a.m. Thank you, members.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29.